I unfortunately am going to have to just go through the whole. Good morning. Nice and loud. I'll call to order the regular meeting of the Zoning and Planning Committee. Today is March 20th, 2014. I'm Lisa Bender, the chair of the committee, and I am joined by council members Goodman, Johnson, Warsami, and Council President Johnson. We have 6 items on today's agenda. Before we get started, I know there are a lot of people here who would like to speak. We have 2 items on the public hearing. If you would like to speak, please sign in with the clerk over there. And I know we also have folks in an overflow room across the hall in room 319, so feel free to go and have a seat in there if you'd like. So I'm going to start with item number 6, which was on our postponed agenda. This was an appeal from the Heritage Preservation Commission regarding LaRive condominiums, and this has been withdrawn by the appellant. So I will move to delete this item. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? That carries. Then I will move to the consent agenda, which is items 3, 4, and 5. Item number 3 is referred by CPED regarding 515 on the park to approve a corrected resolution passed by the City Council on March 29th, vacating 2 sidewalk easements. Item number 4 is to accept the withdrawal of an appeal by the City Planning Commission's decision to deny a conditional use permit application submitted by Covanta. This is regarding the HERC. So this is regarding burning at the HERC facility downtown. And then item number 5 is on-premise roof signs. It's a subject matter following ordinance amending Title 20 of the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances regarding on-premise signs to return Chapter 520 to the author. So I will move the consent agenda. Is there any discussion, or would anyone like to pull anything? I suppose I should ask. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? That carries. Then we'll move to our public hearing, and item number 1 is an appeal from the Zoning Board of Adjustment regarding 1100 and 1118 University Avenue Northeast. It's an appeal filed by Robert Riskin with all property owners immediately adjacent to McDonald's, and appealing the Zoning Board of Adjustment's decision granting several sign variances. And I'll start with staff. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you. The application before you is an appeal of the decision of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Neighbors of the McDonald's at 1100 through 1118 University Avenue Northeast are appealing the approval of 3 of the 4 requested sign variances. At its meeting on February 20th, the Board of Adjustment concurred with the staff findings and moved approval to approve 3 of the 4 requested variances. Variance A was a variance to increase the maximum number of freestanding signs from 1 to 4. B was a variance to increase the maximum area for all freestanding sign area from 80 square feet to 330 square feet. And variance D was a variance to increase the maximum height of freestanding signs from 8 feet to 10 feet 3 inches, and then also to 10 feet 9 inches. The vote on these items was 7-0. There was a variance C, a requested variance to increase the maximum height of menu boards. This was denied by the Zoning Board of Adjustment. This item was not appealed by the applicant. So the only 3 items before committee today are variances A, B, and D that you'll see listed in the request for council action. The appellant is Robert Riskin on behalf of the property owners adjacent to McDonald's. Their complete statement for reasons of appeal are attached to today's report. You'll find in the appeal statement and the attached testimony reference to some existing enforcement issues regarding noise, hours of operation, lighting, etc. Those issues are being handled outside of the requested variances that are before you today. So the only request before you today is a review of the appeal related to the 3 requested sign variances that have been approved by the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Additionally, there are proposals for this McDonald's to do a remodel. They're going to be doing a reface of the existing structure, and they are proposing to add the double drive-through. This was administratively approved, and therefore, once again, the only item before you are the 3 requested sign variances. Here's a copy of the proposed site plan where you'll see the double drive-through where the existing single is there on the property. There are no changes to the building footprint. The access, the drive aisles are all in compliance with the zoning code. The proposed signage would include 2 new menu boards that we see here, a double canopy that indicates the drive-through with a clearance. When rounding the corner here, the building has a clearance height with an overhang, and so McDonald's is proposing to identify the clearance height earlier on at the point of ordering to avoid any sort of collision with an oversized vehicle. And then finally, there are 2 order here signs that would accompany the 2 menu boards. Now, as proposed, the applicant has indicated to staff that the speaker box can be either independent of the order here sign or it could be incorporated. But either way, the speaker box is not a part of the sign. The only part of the sign is the order here portion. So the order here signs exceed height, and the proposed drive-through sign exceeds height. And the area includes the 2 menu boards, the 1 canopy, and then the 2 additional canopy, and then the existing pylon sign that is located at the corner of University and Broadway. I have a photograph of that as well. So this existing pylon sign will remain. This sign received a permit for a reface a few years ago. The appellants have noted that the permit still appears to be open for reasons of ensuring that we are able to identify all of our sign permits going forward. This isn't like a homeowner building, pulling a building permit where we look for that final completion and a closed permit. So sign permits stay open just so that we can identify them throughout perpetuity and make sure that we can find them when doing historical research, especially with, we are working with signs that are larger in area than would be permitted with the zoning code. This will be the 4th site that has a double drive-through. There are 3 existing sites within the city of Minneapolis that have previously been approved, the additional signage in the 2nd drive-through. Those locations are at 4121 Hiawatha Avenue. That site's approximately 1 acre. 3110 East Lake Street, that site is just under an acre. And then 2400 Nicollet Avenue, that one is about 0.6 acres. This site is one of the larger sites that McDonald's owns within the city of Minneapolis. It's 1.26 acres. It was established in 1975. The existing store was remodeled and approved with a conditional use permit and a variance for fence height in 1994, and it's been in this location since that time. Staff analyzed the required findings for the proposed variances. You'll find those in the attached staff report. Essentially, staff found that practical difficulty exists for all of the sign variances as requested. We found that the practical difficulty includes the size of the property, that it's necessary in order to provide adequate direction to traffic on site. The increased height was necessary to identify the height of the structure and the eaves for clearance for oversized vehicles, and that these circumstances were not created by the applicant. The reason why the sign area variances and the quantity are requested, again, are based on the size of the property and the existing pylon sign, which is not proposed to be changed. Under the second finding, staff found that all of the variances were consistent with the spirit and intent of the ordinance and were a reasonable request. Staff did not find that the proposed signage in this case would be out of character or cause injury to enjoyment of other property in the vicinity. The proposed signage is internal to the property. The majority, so the existing pylon sign is here, and then the proposed signage would be all located here. There are two additional findings for a sign adjustment that staff analyzed and the Board of Adjustment adopted, and that is the sign adjustment would not significantly lead to sign clutter or be inconsistent with the purpose of the zoning district for which it was located, and that further the sign adjustment would relate to size, shape, material, color, illumination, and character to the function and architectural character of the building. So staff recommended approval, and the Board of Adjustment approved 3 of the 4 variances, all with the same condition, and that staff review the master sign plan for the project if approved. With that, I can take any questions.
Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, I will open the public hearing, and I'll use our sign-in sheet. So I have John Whaler.
I would not like to speak first, please. We had an order that we wanted.
Oh, sure, absolutely. So actually, we should hear from the appellant first.
My name is Robert Riskin. I filed the appeal on behalf of all the neighbors surrounding this property. I live at 1117 3rd Street Northeast. I'm going to read a brief statement and also submit into evidence pictures and other materials that I think will be pertinent to our argument. So McDonald's on University and Broadway wants to create 2 lanes for their drive-through and use additional signage. Evidence and neighborhood responses have been submitted to this committee stating our opposition not only to the signage but the other related issues associated with the double drive-through. I want to point out to this committee that this is a unique property for McDonald's in Minneapolis. To our knowledge, it's the only property with residential properties adjacent to all 4 streets this property affects: Broadway, University, 3rd Street, and 12th Avenues Northeast. The existing lighting is imposing on all adjacent properties. More, higher, redundant signage poses no adverse impact to McDonald's if they have it or not, but significant adverse impact to the neighbors if they are allowed to install it without any additional conditional use required permits. The signage shows a lack of respect for the integrity of this neighborhood, and as a gateway to the hard-fought redeveloped Arts District, this property should be less garish, not more. The Sheraton Neighborhood Organization held a meeting inviting representatives of this property, a corporate-owned store. The many concerns were raised again there and ignored or given lip service by the owners and the architectural firm. You will hear testimony from many of the property owners today who could not be present about the deception described in the architect's plans, the semantics used to describe illumination of the menu board as internally lit versus backlit. We have requested copies of traffic studies that they say they've done to show no increase in traffic. No studies have been shared with us to date. It appears to the citizens and the taxpaying property owners that this city has sent pieces of the approval process to several departments which have apparently rubber-stamped their portion of the process without examining the whole picture and the potential negative impacts on the neighbors, the neighborhood, and the community. Signage is used to attract business. This store needs no more signage to attract more business. Anyone who drives by day or night knows this is a McDonald's. The current drive-through is clearly marked. More signage is merely redundant and would be installed insensitively to the impact on the adjacent properties by adding even more light and sound and devaluating the properties adjacent to it. You will hear testimony from neighbors who've been here before McDonald's was allowed to build, and also at the time in 1994 when they requested a change in their footprint where conditional use permits were required and were put in place. These conditions were set for a purpose to mitigate light, sight, sound, and noise and auto pollution entering into the neighboring properties. Essentially, except for the 8-foot fence which is still standing, the rest of the conditions have been ignored. This store has not been in compliance with hours of operation, light brightness, litter on the streets. The management has been ignoring requests for noise ordinance signage, among other issues. The company will claim that complaints went unanswered because of management turnover. However, after so many decades of operation, managers being trained at McDonald's own Hamburger University, this is hardly an excuse for poor oversight. A simple training manual could have and should have been used on the premises to consistently manage from manager to manager. Former complaints were sent to the police and the city council person who is no longer in office. The complaints were not logged or registered until recently when we and the adjacent neighbors were instructed to send them all to 311. Our newly elected council members heard the voices of community when they got elected. We hope you hear ours also. This project is laden and hidden with deception from the start. Note the demolition verbiage on the architect's plans in very small print. It is not in keeping with the development of one of the finest neighborhood turnarounds in the country. And again, I emphasize it is not showing the respect for the integrity of the neighborhood, as our mayor has made a priority in these considerations. I've attached night photos of the lighting imposing on the properties along 3rd Street Northeast and Broadway, and what is not shown is that the yellow lights in the front of the building are often left on all night after closing. We requested a minimum that McDonald's live up to the original conditions imposed in 1994 by continuing to mitigate light, sight, and sound and all other forms of pollution. If the signage is approved, then fencing is also should be 2 feet higher. The fence should be replaced and be at least as high as the new signage that's requested. McDonald's used to have employee litter patrols for the neighboring streets, and those should be reinstated and kept on a permanent, regular schedule. Noise ordinance signs should be erected at the entrance to any drive-through and enforced by the management. Light brightness should be reduced to have less intrusive negative impact on neighborhood properties, and a set number of infractions be agreed to by the neighbors and this property owner with the penalty of losing operating license if infractions are exceeded. In summary, this is a neighborhood that deserves and demands the respect and consideration from this business and the departments of the city that exist to protect us from adverse impacts and corporate arrogance.
Thank you, Mr. Riskin. Council Member Johnson has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Riskin. Just a quick question for you. I was just wondering, did the Neighborhood Association take a official position on this at all?
Yes, the Sheraton Neighborhood Organization did meet and opposed this request for variance as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we will continue with the public hearing, and I'll ask...
Who should I turn these documents into?
To the clerk, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Continue with the public hearing. I'll call in order, and please keep your statements to 2 minutes, and please try not to repeat what someone else has already said. So then we have John Whaler. Whalen.
Ends are very...
No. And please state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
My name is John Whalen. I live at 1115 3rd Street Northeast. And I stood at this very podium in 1994 talking about the McDonald's structure. And they agreed to certain things. And I know this is going to be a bit of a repeat of what Robert Riskin said, but I think it's important. They agreed to various things. The 2 major ones that they agreed to was noise abatement and hours. Okay, the noise abatement, they built the fence, that maintained it sketchily, but maintained it, and did not pay any attention to any of the other things we talked about for noise abatement. They are not in the conditional use permit because we weren't sure what would be necessary, but they agreed to listen to the neighborhood. Okay, I know I had called at least 6 times between 1995 and 2000, both to the city and to the McDonald's, to talk about putting up a sign just to turn down your radios when you went through the drive-through, because that's one of the great producers of signs. They refused to do it. Okay, and as far as the hours is concerned, within a year after signing the conditional use permit, McDonald's was violating the hours consistently. So when we get to the signage now, I don't even trust them to obey the fact that they got turned down for that one variance. I think they'll build it and then say, oops. And I'm not sure that the city will do anything about it. They have been consistent in maliciously, I believe, and certainly with purpose, violating their conditional use permit, violating everything that they agreed to. So why are we now giving them variances to have a variance on ordinance? The ordinance states that it should be done only with undue hardship. I've heard of practical difficulties, but I haven't heard of undue hardship being imposed upon McDonald's. And this is, I think, the crux of the matter. They don't need this, they want it, and they're trying to get it through even over neighborhood opposition, and with legitimate neighborhood opposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whalen. Beth Forkenbrock. And then after that, Dennis Jackson and Timothy Kennedy. And just a quick reminder, today we're looking at these 3 variances, so please keep your testimony relevant to those items.
My name is Beth Forkenbrock, and my home is located at 308 12th Avenue Northeast. My property abuts McDonald's property to the north, separated by a fence. I have lived in my home for over 40 years, long before the first McDonald's restaurant was ever constructed in my neighborhood. and back when our neighborhood was very quiet. I am in agreement with Robert Riskin and my other neighbors who have expressed their concern regarding the proposed signage changes at McDonald's. I would like to address certain concerns relating to the proposed signage. I'm sure you are familiar with the Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth, and more specifically, its general land use policy. In that policy, it states in policy 1.2.2, and I quote, ensure that lighting and signage associated with non-residential uses do not create negative impacts for residential properties. Policy 1.2.3 states, lessen the negative impacts of non-residential uses on residential areas through controls on noise, odors, and hours open to the public, end quote. In this instance, there will be significant additional negative impacts to the adjacent residential areas in terms of noise, odors, safety, parking, traffic, and light pollution resulting from the erection of the signage, which will enable the construction of a second drive-through lane for McDonald's. Regarding traffic, briefly, with the location of the signage as it is currently proposed, any traffic into McDonald's from University Avenue, the University Avenue side, must circle around all of the residential properties, 6 houses with 10 residences that border McDonald's in order to get to and use the new drive-through. Then drive by all those properties again as their vehicles leave the McDonald's property. So if they come in from University, they have to go around. The building is here. Our properties are here and here. They have to go around here like so and around the building, then get into the lane, the drive-through lane, and then circle our properties again to go back out. Any traffic into McDonald's from the Broadway street side using a drive-through must also drive by all of these residential properties. Obviously, additional vehicles will create additional auto emissions for the neighboring residents as well. Regarding noise, a second drive-through will also create more noise from car engines and car audio systems. This is more than just an inconvenience. It is a livability issue.
Thank you. If you could just finish up.
Every time I go into my backyard in the early spring to the late fall, I hear, "Welcome to McDonald's, may I take your order?" Now I'll hear this times 2. You cannot imagine how loud the booming car audio systems are. It's regarding the noise control, is it not possible for McDonald's to have volume controls on the new speakers they plan to install? The volume used at 10 p.m. on a weekday night should not be the same as the volume used during rush hour. I realize this is a consideration for the neighbors. However, we want to tolerate McDonald's noise, their smell, their traffic, their lights, even their trash. So what about a consideration for us?
Okay, thank you. We have so many people that need to speak today. So thank you very much, Mr. Jackson, and then Mr. Kennedy.
Good morning. My name is Dennis Jackson. I live at 308 12th Avenue Northeast with Beth Forkenbrock. I'm here today only in support of the issues presented by the people before and our good neighbors that adjoin McDonald's. Certainly, the speaker box mentioned is almost in our backyard, and it is extremely irritating, and any advance of signage or anything else would only exacerbate an already very irritating situation. So I am here today in support of our good neighbors, the Northeast and the Arts District. Thank you very much. Good
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy, and then Brenda Nyland, and then Pam Lehan. And please just state your name and address for the record.
Tim Kennedy, and I live at 1121 3rd Street Northeast. We only can address the signage. They're asking for an increasement to 330 over the 80. They're already at 223, as they're saying, so they're already over the limit. They refer to the properties, the other properties that have the signage on Lake Street and Hiawatha and so on. None of them have nowhere near that amount of signage already. And so I'm not sure why you'd increase it, continually increase it. To the menu boards, which is part of the square footage. It's 41 square feet. It says in the city code that it only can be 36 square feet. So there's no variance asking for a larger sign, so I'm not sure what that's all about. Why is that not addressed? It is a backlit sign. The city code says that a backlit sign is, let me see, allowing it to defines backlit as being a light source contained within the sign element or sign cabinet that illuminates by shining through the translucent surface of the face sign. That's what it does. It doesn't light up the letters or anything like that. That's how it is. As she was saying about driving through around, everything is forcing everything to go around past all of our homes twice. That is a livability issue for us. And they're saying that the practical difficulties exist in complying with the ordinance because of circumstances unique to the property. McDonald's has been there for 40 years. We asked them to build it in a different place. This wouldn't even be an issue if they had to build it the way that the city told the place on Lake Street to, 8 feet off the property line. That's the code.
Thank
for
you,
the
sir.
city.
If you just have one final thought, that's been 2 minutes.
Well, I want to go to the height of them. None of the heights of the signs that they're proposing are the heights of the sign. The canopy sign is a lit up sign from above, and the code states that that has to be calculated into the square footage. It's not calculated into square footage. All the signage that they've shown us is not in compliance.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, Brenda Nyholm and then Pan Lehan, and then those are the final two people we have signed up for this item, but if you would like to speak, please make your way to the podium after those two speakers.
Hi, my name is Brenda Nyholm, and I live at 314 12th Avenue Northeast. I'm the fourth generation living in that home. I was there before McDonald's was even built, and it's just become from a neighborhood to just chaoticness. I mean, the traffic and the crime, and it's just crazy. And there's a school across the street with about 500 kids, and there's going to be an increase in grades and whatnot and teachers. Anyways, there is no need for a second drive-through. This is McDonald's on University and Broadway. Everybody and anybody can see that it is. It doesn't need any more signage. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lehan?
My name is Pamela Lehan, and I live at 1117 3rd Street Northeast. And I just, for the record, wanted everyone to know that I'm in compliance and support all of my neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on this issue? Anyone else? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. And I want to note that we've been joined by committee member, Councilmember Reich, and Jacob Fry, who represents the 3rd Ward. Do you want to say anything? Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Chair Bender. Just a few comments that I have. Some of the arguments I entirely buy. I've seen it myself. Some of them I don't. This is an area that has come into its own in the last decade or so, largely because of the creative class. This creative class has not been, corporate vendors or franchisees. The creative class has made small and locally owned businesses. They've bolstered 13th Avenue, which is one of the most exciting areas in the entire city right now in terms of the theater, the restaurants, and everything the neighborhood brings. I think there's really two different issues that we need to tackle when we look at this variance. The first piece is there was a conditional use permit, as I think many people pointed out, that was issued about 20 years ago. And while it doesn't go into the consideration of whether to grant the variance, it should be looked at in terms of the conduct of the business in general. And we found that they have been operating outside of the hours of operation that they should be. We have found that there has been debris and loitering and litter in the surrounding area, and the employees should have been picking it up. We found that several items of this conditional use permit simply have not been met. So now we're looking at a variance beyond that, and in granting that variance, I think there needs to be a showing of need. What is the reason? What is the reason behind getting additional signage or an additional lane? And quite frankly, to a business that I do not think has added substantially to the community in general, I just don't think another lane plus additional signage beyond the already granted conditional use permit is necessary. Thank you, Chair.
Councilmember Frye. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we grant the appeal filed by Robert Riskin and on behalf of all the property owners in the area. Oh,
Yes.
yeah. All right.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion to grant the appeals. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. That motion carries.
Madam Chair, sorry, just in light and based on the staff recommendation to approve those variances and the Board of Adjustments action to approve them, a staff direction now to accompany the motion to deny the variances should be made to draft findings.
Got it. So I will move to request that staff draft findings in support of the motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Thank you. Okay. Councilmember Goodman had a point of clarification on item number 5 before we start the public hearing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to note Council President Johnson pointed out that the reason that Chapter 520 is being returned to author is because it was not amended in the action. The actual action to allow on-premise roof signs, as long as they're flat on the building and not uplit, is what we just approved. We just did that under 543, not under 520, which is being returned to author. So the opinion of the Planning Commission that was approved has moved forward, which means we are allowing these rooftop signs.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman. All right, item number 2. Referred by City Council, this is in regards to a moratorium proposed for Linden Hills, Fulton, Armitage, Kenny, and Lyndhurst neighborhoods. And we'll start with staff. Thank you, Mr. Wittenberg.
Good morning, committee members. On Friday, March 7th, the City Council enacted an interim ordinance affecting demolition and teardown of new single-family homes and duplexes in the R1 through R2B zoning districts in 5 southwest Minneapolis neighborhoods, including Linden Hills, Fulton, Armitage, Kenny, and Lyndhurst. That moratorium also affects major additions of 1,500 square feet or more. And I'll just say right now that I will use the terms interim ordinance and moratorium interchangeably. They essentially mean the same thing. Councilmember Palmisano introduced the ordinance in response to a wide range of concerns that were exacerbated by the rapid pace of demolitions and new construction in the affected 13th Ward neighborhoods. Unlike most ordinances that we're all familiar with that go through the approval process, an interim ordinance or moratorium is in effect immediately upon introduction, which is spelled out in section 529.40 of the city zoning ordinance. The same chapter of the zoning ordinance indicates that the Zoning and Planning Committee must follow up with a public hearing. So that's the purpose of today's hearing, to hear public testimony, to consider the ordinance, and any potential amendments to the language that was introduced on March 7th. And just to be clear about the purpose of an interim ordinance, the zoning ordinance states that interim ordinances are established to protect the planning process and the health, safety, and welfare by regulating, restricting, or prohibiting any use or development in all or part of the city while the city is conducting studies or has authorized a study to be conducted or has scheduled a hearing to consider adoption or amendment of the comprehensive plan or official controls, including but not limited to zoning ordinances, subdivision regulations, site plan review regulations, sanitary codes, building codes, and official maps. A planning study led by CPED is underway And some of the issues being addressed in this study were certainly already on our work plan prior to introduction of this ordinance, and the interim ordinance, of course, adds a sense of urgency to complete that work. This map offers a citywide perspective on a few different things. First, the red X's represent all wrecking permits issued in 2013, and that includes all types of buildings, not just residential structures. The yellow crosses, which you'll note are particularly concentrated in the 5 affected neighborhoods, are properties for which both a wrecking permit was obtained as well as a permit for a new home. The orange crosses represent new homes being built on vacant lots. And of course, most of those would have had wrecking permits at some point because most of the construction is happening on sites that have previously had buildings on them, but those wrecking permits simply would have been obtained prior to 2013. And one important clarification is that one thing that's not represented on this map are situations that people often refer to as virtual teardowns. So if somebody is tearing down most of a building but perhaps leaves a wall or two standing and does an addition, that is a different kind of permit, actually, that's not reflected on this map. This map zooms specifically to the area affected by the interim ordinance. In this case, the blue dots represent properties where both wrecking permit and building permit for new home were obtained in 2013. And just a small note, the areas in white are the only zoning districts in the area that are not affected by the moratorium. A very large percent, perhaps 90% of the ward, is covered by relatively low density zoning classifications. Here's a comparison of the number of homes built in each ward over the course of the past 5 years with 13 colors. Some of those shades of blue are maybe a little difficult to distinguish from one another, but suffice it to say that this is the 13th ward. Which you'll see dramatically trending upward over the course of the last couple of years. And again, it's worth noting that this graph doesn't include virtual teardowns. It's also worth noting that I think only one home constructed in the 13th ward that would be reflected on this graph is not in the area affected by the moratorium. So there's very much a concentration in the 5 affected neighborhoods. This is the same data, but this goes back 10 years. The first thing you might ask yourself is, what was happening there? That perhaps this new construction of homes in the 13th ward is not unprecedented. What you're seeing there is largely a result of Heritage Park in the 5th ward, which, as you're all familiar with, is one of the largest redevelopment projects, if not the largest redevelopment project in the city's history. So one could deduce from this graph that what is happening in a relatively concentrated geographic area of the 13th ward is on par with what happened in, again, the largest redevelopment project in the city's history, which included a mix of single-family homes, multifamily, duplexes, fourplexes, et cetera. But only single-family are reflected on this graph. I took a very quick look at census data for just one of the affected neighborhoods, looking at comparing 2000 to 2010 census data, just to get a sense of what has been happening for part of this time period in part of the affected area. In Fulton, for example, the number of housing units increased by a fraction of 1% from 2000 to 2010. But the population actually increased by over 5%. So what does that tell us? That tells us that in some cases, couples are replacing single-person households, and many of those couples are likely growing their families in the area. What does that lead to? Discussion about schools. We've certainly heard anecdotally that an attraction for this area is the schools, and some of those schools are bursting at the seams, but that is certainly not a reason for this interim ordinance. As you all know, most likely the school board did approve a 5-year enrollment plan recently, and that enrollment plan did increase the capacity of Southwest High School by an additional 450 students over the course of just the next 5 years. So now I'm going to get into what the issues are, the problems are that we are going to be addressing and are addressing as part of the interim ordinance. The first and probably most urgent problem that we have to solve includes issues surrounding construction site management. Data regarding complaints about these issues is not easy to come by in using the city's current software system, I'm sorry to say. But zoning staff was able to indicate that in the 5 neighborhoods in question, there have been 105 zoning enforcement requests for service related to specifically to new single-family dwellings or large residential additions over the course of the past 2 years. And this number doesn't include the time spent by our building inspectors or our environmental management staff on some of the site management issues that I'll show photos of. I think every reasonable person understands that construction sites are messy, and there's a level of noise that's produced by construction. But I think, as you'll see in some of these photos, there has been a level of carelessness among some builders, absolutely not all builders, that has created a situation that neighboring property owners should not have to tolerate. This photo was taken, I believe, last Sunday. It shows trusses in the street, a lot of mud being tracked into the street. And again, this is on a Sunday. This was not a situation where these trusses were about to be moved within the next hour. Same site had a portable restroom in the boulevard, which we have an awful lot of photos of, and on sites throughout the affected area. An overflowing dumpster, and we hear from folks that this type of situation sits like this for an awful long time. Construction materials and a portable restroom in the boulevard. Dumpster blocking most of the public sidewalk. More restrooms. Sidewalk that would not be easy to navigate. Demolition debris in the public boulevard. And a makeshift dumpster built in the Can't tell. I believe that is in the public street. It might have just been in the boulevard. I believe I saw another photo of this one that indicated that snowplows did have to navigate around that makeshift dumpster. So those are the construction site management issues, the kinds of issues that we're talking about. Second issue that is being addressed in the planning study includes taking a fresh look at our zoning standards for new construction of homes. And this would include, but would not be limited to, the point system that you're probably familiar with for new homes. This is a system that was put in place in 2005. In terms of background, Council President Johnson will certainly recall that this point system was developed during a moratorium that was in place on the north side for a large swath of the north side, which also affected lower density development. It certainly had some parallels to the interim ordinance that we're discussing today. That one was focused on serious concerns about the quality and design of a lot of new homes, in particular on the north side. So some of these issues that we came up with through an incentive system, which applies citywide, were targeted at solving a particular set of issues that were happening in part of our city at that time. And I think for the most part they've been successful. However, it's time, I think, for a fresh look at those standards, and that certainly has been one thing that has been on our work plan. Some of you will also remember that the city adopted revised residential infill development standards in 2007, and this was largely in response to concerns regarding the height and scale of some new homes being constructed primarily in southwest Minneapolis. Through that process, the city adopted a maximum floor area for new homes, reduced the maximum height by 5 feet, reduced the amount of lot area that could be covered by both buildings and impervious surfaces, among other changes adopted at that time. Again, just a graphic that was used at that time demonstrating what could have been built prior to 2007 versus that reduced allowed height down to 30 feet.
Excuse me, Mr. Wittenberg. Councilmember Goodman.
Mr. Wittenberg, when you did this relook, and I know I was here then, did you look at it on a lot basis? You have 10,000 square feet, you can build on 3,000 of them, or did you look at it in the context of what was next door or around? Is that why we see this problem of bungalows in one location and then a 2.5-story home in another? Because we were looking straight up at what the lot size was plus the side yard setbacks, or was there a look at how it would be compared to other homes in the area? That seems to get to the crux of the concern that I've heard. What would be fine in Kenwood size-wise probably wouldn't be fine in Lyndhurst size-wise.
Chair Bender, Councilmember Goodman, you raise a critical point that most of the regulations that were adopted back in 2005 and 2007 are not context sensitive in terms of looking specifically at the homes on the adjacent properties or on the block. They primarily look at lot size and are regulations that apply citywide. There's some level of context sensitive regulation put into the site plan review standards, but for the most part, these are citywide standards. So I think the changes that we've seen are certainly noticeable, but I think some people are a little surprised by the scale of some of the new housing being constructed. So again, we will take a fresh look at those standards. And as Councilmember Goodman alludes to, it's critical that whatever zoning changes we come up with are either particularly context sensitive, which has its own kind of implications for predictability and staff resources in working on making a new home particularly context sensitive to its surroundings. But I think there's certainly a realization that whatever we come up with has to be practical and has to work citywide, not just for this particular housing submarket found in this part of the 13th Ward. So far, construction management and zoning issues. The third general category, and all these categories overlap to some degree, are a variety of environmental issues. For example, we are looking at what the city can do to, at the very least, incentivize or incent deconstruction of homes so that more of the waste stream is reused and recycled rather than sent off to a landfill or to the HERC facility. We also will likely be looking at tree preservation issues. We've heard that loud and clear from some neighbors as a major concern, that not only are mature trees removed on construction sites, but that trees on adjacent properties are sometimes affected due to compaction or trimming branches or what have you. There are also a variety of water issues that we need to get a better handle on. And what this map shows is areas that are known to have a higher water table to a degree that is likely to affect standard residential construction and construction of a basement. Certainly there are other areas of the city where you can run into groundwater in situations, particularly where you're building multiple levels underground in a parking garage, for example. But again, these areas are, you have a good chance of having a water table issue when you're building a residential basement.
Excuse me, Mr. Wittenberg. Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Wittenberg. So is this a view of the city? So essentially the northern third of the city doesn't have those issues? I'm just curious.
That's correct.
Okay. Gosh, no kidding. Yeah.
And
excuse me, Council President Johnson has another question.
Mr. Wittenberg, and so where does this map come from, please?
Our Public Works staff prepared this map, and they're confident in its data and the data that went into it and its accuracy. I don't know how this information was exactly obtained.
Okay, so I think this would be helpful for all of us, actually, to take a look at this just in a generic sense. Thank you.
And I'm not going to pretend to be expert about the city's geologic history, but this generally, the chain of lakes generally is an interglacial riverbed. That was a route of the Mississippi River between the last two glaciers in the area. So stuff was deposited there that isn't the greatest soil and causes and contributes to high water table issues. So we do have a cross-department group of staff diving into all of these issues. In terms of timeline, we know that there is a real sense of urgency. We think that the issues that don't require ordinance changes, including some of the construction site management issues, can be addressed relatively quickly. Of course, anything that actually does require a change to city ordinance will inherently take a little bit longer. Clearly, we would expect that there would be public engagement that would involve a lot of stakeholders, and just that takes some time. So just going back to a general map of the area in question, you have an updated copy of the ordinance itself, which includes revisions to the version that was introduced on March 7th. It should be noted that there are some exceptions written into the ordinance. One thing that is just an exception under state law and city ordinance generally is that if somebody has filed a land use application to build something that would be affected by the moratorium, and they've filed that, just filed the application prior to the effective date of the ordinance, that project is not affected by the interim ordinance. An exception that was added includes if a wrecking permit was filed prior to the effective date of the ordinance. Not only can that property owner proceed with the wrecking, they can also proceed with the new construction. There are some additional exceptions to the interim ordinance that, again, is in the language that is in front of you today that either myself or Mr. Nilsson would be happy to respond to or answer questions about. It's important to note that people can file applications for waivers from the interim ordinance. There are two criteria that we are required to take a look at in analyzing those waivers. One is demonstration of some substantial hardship, and the second is that granting the waiver will not affect the purpose for which the moratorium is in place and the purpose of the study that's taking place during the interim ordinance. So, in summary, I know that Councilmember Palmisano did not take this lightly. She clearly understands that a moratorium is a blunt instrument. You have all received letters and email messages from people who have unique stories about how they are affected by this interim ordinance. And I know that every person on this committee certainly clearly understands that in order to achieve a variety of our policies in the comprehensive plan, we need people to build in our city and invest in our city, and we need to attract people to our city. We've celebrated the fact that each of the past 2 years we have issued permits for over $1 billion in construction value per year in building and remodeling permits, and we'll most likely easily surpass that mark again this year. So I know that we're all conscious of the fact that an interim ordinance moratorium sends a message, seems to send a message, at least to those who are affected by it, that we don't want investment in this area. But occasionally, the rapid pace of development of certain type converges with other issues that shows us that something's not working and that we need to hit the pause button. So staff is recommending that the City Council adopt the interim ordinance that includes the language that you received either today or within the past 24 hours.
Thank you. Mr. Wittenberg, can you describe our normal process for inspecting construction sites?
Well, first I'm going to clarify that I don't personally oversee any enforcement activities, a fact for which I am grateful. One thing that is challenging is that many of the photos that I showed you of violations, those aren't specifically violations of the zoning ordinance. They're not violations of the building code. So we have zoning inspectors who are scheduled to go out and look at things at a certain time. Building inspectors who have to go out periodically when certain events happen, and oftentimes when they're scheduled to go out and look at something is when they will see something happening that shouldn't be happening, and at that point they're charged with trying to resolve that issue and hopefully gain compliance as quickly as possible. We, of course, don't have the resources for an inspector to camp out at these sites all day long. So things are going to happen, and we hope that they can get resolved as quickly as possible.
Are there other questions? Mr. Poor.
Chairman Bender, let me just augment what Mr. Wittenberg said. Generally, what will happen is the building inspectors will get a call when there's a foundation inspection, footing foundation inspection. There'll be often that's called in by the builder. They request that inspection. It's a sequential inspection they need to move forward. Then there'll be a subsequent framing inspection where the shell of the building, the roof is put on. That's often when, pardon me, when we found out that builders are not building to the exact approved plan regarding windows or placements of doors or other things. That's often when that's discovered. As Mr. Wittenberg said, it's often when we're out at the site that we see these other issues apparent to us that need to be addressed and dealt with. There's a final inspection that comes up for the certificate of occupancy. There's an additional final inspection or subsequent inspections that are concurrent to those building code inspections by the zoning enforcement group, and they're looking at the site plan, the other issues that are on the site plan that are not directly building code issues. There's an erosion control permit that's issued early on when there's the soil disturbance, and that's done by environmental. So there's a series of inspections that occur, some of which are facilitated by the builders requesting those inspections. Others are set up based on the timelines of the permits.
Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to extend on that thought, Mr. Poor, that is all augmented by the complaint-driven component as well.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think, we've commented that we've had more complaints about construction sites in the last 2 years than in the preceding years, certainly since I've been around. And that is right. Those often come into us either through 311. One of the challenges we get on gathering some data is maybe not surprisingly, people are loathsome to complain about a job site, but they'll often call in with a question. The question leads to us inspecting it, and that's when there may be an issue that's revealed to us. So sometimes those don't come in as complaints, but questions, but we have to follow up on them. But the net effect is the same often.
Are there other questions? Mr. Nielsen, I wondered, I know I've gotten questions about how the moratorium was enacted, and I wondered if you could just sort of review the legal framework of the ordinance.
Chair Bender, committee members, I think Mr. Wittenberg at the start of his presentation actually addressed it, but to give a little more detail, the city zoning authority is derived from the Municipal Planning Act and state law. And state law authorizes cities to use this tool known as an interim ordinance or a moratorium. The city adopted its interim ordinance guidelines in Chapter 529 of our city code. And in particular, just in a very general sense, a moratorium is a tool that allows a city to study an issue without the pressure of time generated by pending applications. So an issue or a problem has been identified. Rather than allow that problem or issue to fester and continue unabated, this tool allows the city to push the pause button to study an issue and to develop appropriate regulations, including changes to the ordinance and changes to policies and procedures that we use with regard to the issue. Neither state law nor local ordinance requires notice or a hearing before the moratorium is effective. It was voted unanimously at the City Council on March 7th upon subject matter introduction, and upon that introduction it is effective. That action included the simultaneous authorization to conduct the study that Mr. Wittenberg has discussed. And in fact, in large part, that study was already in progress even before that authorization. City ordinance requires a public hearing on the language of the interim ordinance, and that is what we're here today to do. So going forward, we have a piece of legislation in front of you. That is the interim ordinance in that language. And it would proceed through the city process, committee process, and city process like a consideration of any other piece of legislation. So it's subject to a majority vote. And the language can be changed up until the final vote of the city council at the full city council. But to stress again that law does not require notice and a hearing before it's effective. And because of the purpose of these moratoria and the need often to respond to a problem quickly, either for unanticipated reasons or otherwise, it makes sense that they're allowed to be effective upon introduction. But going forward, again, the interim ordinance is before you, and so the final call really on the continuation of this moratorium will be made by the full city council.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a question for Mr. Poor. So we've seen in the last 2 years an increase in violations of or violations of code, things being done that shouldn't be. So in order to address those, we need increased enforcement. Mr. Wittenberg mentioned that we don't have the staff resources to keep up with these things. So I'm wondering if we're having an increase in these violations, I would think we'd be seeing an increase in terms of fines collected for the violations, which in turn could be used to pay for more folks to enforce them. So I'm just wondering, is there some disconnect there where maybe our fines aren't high enough for these things in order to properly enforce? And is this a loss leader, if you will, that we don't have the financial resources to have enough folks out there enforcing? Or can you just help me better understand that, where that's coming from?
Chairman Bender, Councilmember Johnson, I think I'd like to put a little context around this, is that and this is something we're looking at, and we've been studying, started looking at this before the moratoria. Often when there's a problem with the way the construction is happening on a site, the building inspectors may ask for corrective action. So in these cases, the builders are given an opportunity to correct the problem. If they, for instance, are not building exactly the approved plan with windows, things like that, they're notified that, they're given a chance to amend the plan to see if the plan, as built, if you will, can be approved, although different. Often that's the case. When it's not, they're given a period of time to correct it. On few occasions, we've issued fines. Fines are a coercive tool, they're not a punitive tool. With regard to site issues, often the site issues are addressed for a period of time. And so fines often aren't issued there. We're actually looking at what types of fines we could issue for those site issues. They're not directly under the building code, which is one of the challenges that we've had about enforcing it. That's something we're going to be looking at to see if we've got better tools to do that. Fines have been issued on occasion, but again, usually the threat of a fine is the coercive action that gets us to correct the issue. That doesn't mean that there's not a livability problem if you're next to it. It doesn't mean that the problems don't recur, and it doesn't mean that that we wouldn't foresee having to take further action and resources out there to look at it. So in some ways, that's part of the problem, is we're out there, but we're not able to just issue fines, and I'm not sure fines are really the tool. The fines are really supposed to be a coercive tool. So it is a resource issue, just keeping up to pace with all the complaints and the issues that seem to be reoccurring at these job sites.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll move to the public hearing, but first, we've been joined by Councilmember Palmisano from the 13th Ward, and I'd like to invite her to say anything that she'd like to say.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair Bender, members of the committee. I just wanted to say a couple of words before we open the public hearing. First, it's that I recognize that a moratorium carries a cost, but so does the status quo here. Wrecking permits have increased 117% in this last year, and if people haven't noticed, it's because they really haven't been paying attention. I have been paying attention. I know that as of Monday, 10 days after this moratorium was enacted, 27 of the approximately 80 construction sites still have obvious violations on them, invisible site without entering that job site. Sites that we've put stop work orders on continue to work. So as we seek to promote new housing development across our city, it's important that we review and we update our processes as needed. This is part of our new council taking ownership of existing problems and working to innovate right away. This will have benefits across our city. I think it's especially important to realize that housing investment could and should be happening in more areas, and we need that adherence to help grow housing investment across our city. So not just with bigger fines, but in a better operating mode. Wetlands, as you saw from that map, groundwater conflicts, that was a GPS map. The vast amount of them require special parameters. If we want to keep those neighborhoods with our chain of lakes, with our wetlands, great. If we want the homes around new construction to be livable. This is about residents and a quality of life, whether you're a homeowner, a realtor, or a developer, or sometimes you're a couple of those things here. I think we share these common goals. I think we share goals of livability. I think we share goals of the long-term health and vibrancy of these neighborhoods. And I think we're building for a larger city that is inclusive and diverse and unique. We want to grow our city, and that means density. This argument isn't about adding density to the 13th Ward or not adding density. It's about intense construction in an already built environment. We're moving to more impervious surfaces with less land, fewer trees to absorb the 100-year storms that occur every few years. And we're seeing never before seen strain on our pipes and sewers. It remains to be seen whether the increase in tax revenue from these homes will offset those costs, and those costs are hard to monetize. Can we expect to grow other parts of our city if our ward is using up a disproportionately large share of our natural and city resources? As a city, we're setting ourselves up for success 20 years from now or not. I want to recognize and give voice to the great number of residents that cannot be here today, but have phoned. I've met them in the neighborhood, or they've written letters of concern and urgency. Many of them are the older members of our community, and I just wanted to summarize a quick few of their concerns. The one that, to summarize, it's that aging in place is so much more challenging with so much change on our streets. There's a strong sense of intrusion and disruption. There are major safety issues here for the use of our street and for children on our block. Some of those pictures that Mr. Wittenberg shared. People say they didn't choose to live in the equivalent of large commercial scale next door. Furthermore, there's a decrease in respect. There's the idea that there are people here working in this intense way that are temporary, and we don't want that kind of a relationship. So the conversation spurred by this moratorium has been enlightening, it's been heart-wrenching, and it's been aggravating at times. So long as we operate in this way, our inspectors simply can't keep up. So you will see in the public hearing documents that for everyone who has shared a story of a considerate builder, and there are those out there, there are 5 stories of builders who have ignored, patronized, or threatened. You will see that literally in the public record, that they've threatened their neighbors. We need a way to move forward together, and I look forward to hearing from all of you in the public hearing. Thanks.
Thank you. With that, I will open the public hearing. So we have 38 people signed in to speak today. We would like to give every person a chance to speak, and we really value your input. We're listening. In order to accommodate everyone, we really want to ask everyone to stick to 2 minutes. We'll be timing you with the handy timer. And Andrew Johnson will be my muscle on the time enforcement, so watch out. And so I'm going to read the list. If you haven't signed in, you can still do that. And if you're in the other room, you can still testify. So don't worry, we will hear everyone's voice today. So with that, I will start with Tom Streitz, and then after that, Marlene Parks, Michael Sinenlides. And if I mispronounce your name, it's okay, because we'll ask each person to please state your name and your home address for the record.
Good morning, Madam Chair, council members. First, I want to observe this is a great exercise in democracy. It's so great to see so many of our neighbors out for this important conversation. Once again, my name's Tom Streitz. I'm a longtime resident of the Lyndhurst neighborhood. I reside at 5332 Bryant Avenue South. I'm here this morning in my personal capacity. Prior to my formal comments, I want to thank Councilmember Palmisano for initiating this conversation. I see it as a conversation. Thank you. We should seize this opportunity to have a reasoned and informed debate on tear down of existing housing stock and its impact on our neighbors. The city's mission at the Community Planning and Economic Development is to grow a sustainable city. This statement summarizes well my personal and professional opinion living in the neighborhood on how to advance the city of Minneapolis through growth that is sustainable from an environmental and community perspective. I want to be clear, growth and investment in the city should be celebrated. It should be absolutely celebrated, and the city's about growing. However, when a house is torn down and replaced in our dense urban environment, we are altering not only that lot, but that block and an entire neighborhood. We are making a 100-year decision when we tear down and replace an existing house. It's not a year, it's not a day, it's 100 years. What does sustainable growth look like in the context of tearing down a current structure and replacing it with a new one in a dense urban environment? It means that the impacts of the tear down replacement should be considered from an aesthetic, environmental, and livability perspective and are measured and regulated. Mr. Wittenberg I think, ably described those processes. Environmentally, materials and debris from the torn down structure should be recycled and reused to the greatest extent possible. I want to give a quick example. In North Minneapolis, we now have a contract with an entity that is recycling all the waste materials, employing people, taking the appliances and selling those parts all over the country, taking the original fur from these homes and selling it in New York City and creating jobs. We can do this better from an environmental point of view. Runoff of rainwater should be minimized, and any reduction in our tree canopy should be minimized. Aesthetically, the house, to the greatest extent possible, should use materials that are predominant in the current structures. I realize that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but really, does anyone want to wake up and stare at a big vinyl wall? Finally, and perhaps most importantly, we should consider the impact of the structures on the livability of our neighbors. Truly, a house in our neighborhoods, where many of the lots are 40 feet in width, are not islands unto themselves, but rather form a continuous link of neighborly urban interaction.
I'm reminded that.
Thus, the size of the structure, its look, the materials, its effect on access to the sunlight for the neighbors who may like to garden, all should be considered and weighed. I have great confidence that this conversation will lead to positive outcomes for us as a community and sustainable growth and a greater sense of our interconnectedness as a city and as neighbors will be enhanced. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Parks?
Actually, I loved what he said. I will give my.
Okay.
I'm pro moratorium.
Okay. I'll just state for the record that Ms. Parks declined to speak, but would like to state that she's in favor of the moratorium. Michael Sinonides?
That's me. I think I put my name on the wrong sheet.
Oh, okay. All right. Going quickly. Now we'll have Andy Bear, Julia Parento, Jeremy Fowler.
I'm Andy Bear. I'm a resident and a builder.
Could you please state your residential address?
3606 West 40th Street. So I have a couple points to Wittenberg's statement. Let's see here. First off, I have to apologize for the bad behavior of all the builders that don't clean up their messes and track on the sidewalks and all of those kind of things. That's not the way it should be done. Whether or not it's zoning code or building code or whatever code, they should always keep a clean job site. They should always maintain the sidewalks. They should always do whatever's within reason to make this livability issue not an issue. It should be courteous to your neighbors first. Get your projects done as well. So Wittenberg stated that a wall or two standing, it can be built as a large remodel project. There's something floating around in the building department that's a 60% rule. There's no way we can do one wall or two standing and do this, because there's a 60% rule that says if the project goes over 60%, it will have to be a new construction project. So building plan review determines that. It's not zoning code. So there were 65 tear downs in 13, Ward 13, 17 and 12, 20 and 5, 8 and 4. So 13 had the most, and if this is truly about a study about the rapid pace of infill activity, why isn't this moratorium citywide? Because it seems a little discriminatory to me that if we're not doing this through the whole city to study the adverse effects of this, the height, the size, they're always going to be a little bigger than some of the cottages and bungalows. And I mean, we have the parkways, those all have large houses. We're not even coming close to that. Last thing I have to say is, oftentimes when we redo our stuff, we actually increase green space on the lot. So there we go.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ms. Parento? Julia Parento. Then we'll have Jeremy Fowler, Jason Martinetto.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and if I may, Councilmember Palmisano. I'm Julia Parento. I'm here on behalf of the Minneapolis Realtors Association. I'm not a resident of the city, but I'm here representing a large number of people who are, so I won't state all of their addresses. We want to first of all say, as many people have said already, thank you for starting the dialogue, genuinely, for allowing us to have this conversation in a very public way. We agree that there are problems. We hear that there are problems, and we've lived next to them, and we want to help solve them. We have a lot of ideas on how to solve them, and so we hope that we can be a part of that process. What we don't agree with is that a moratorium specifically is the answer. The moratorium will not prevent dumpsters in the street. It will not prevent the problems that are happening on these construction sites already. It will cause people to lose income. It will cause people to lose jobs. It will prevent them from living the dreams that they had hoped to live in Minneapolis. And we believe that the people who live in those homes and the people who build those homes and those of you who govern these neighborhoods can come together and find solutions to these problems without moving forward with the moratorium. And while I'm here to speak on behalf of the organized real estate industry, there are many people who are coming behind me and who have written to you, who are speaking as members of the real estate industry, but also as residents and as your constituents. And they're upset, they are, and some of them are angry, but they're afraid. They're afraid for their property rights, and they're afraid for what this means for their future in Minneapolis. And so I hope that you hear them and know that they're speaking from the heart, and they're here because they feel so passionately about that. So finally, just as you move forward as stewards of the city and as representatives of all of the residents of Minneapolis, I hope that you as the committee will not recommend passage of this moratorium, because it's your choice now as to what the refrain of One Minneapolis will be. If it will be move in, move up, not move out, or whether it will be closed for business. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fowler, then Mr. Martinetto, then Amy Gustafson, and Kristen Miller.
Good morning. I'm Jeremy Power. I live at 2819 West 52nd Street, Fulton neighborhood. I'm a builder. I've lived in the neighborhood for 10 years. My wife and I actually moved to the neighborhood because we love the character of it. We want to build and remodel in the neighborhood. You know, construction projects are not perfect, and I apologize to any neighbor that has to live around it. They will always, in some instance, be a messy job. But builders are really here, and we hear you. We're here to work with the city and develop a new construction management program that will help everybody manage sites better. I agree. I think we should change some zoning characteristics. I think it would really help our the construction management end of sites as well, specifically with property damage and side yard setbacks. This is affecting our city significantly. Just this week, I've had 2 people who were 100% moving into Linden Hills because of this moratorium, and in their eyes, the audacity for the city to tell somebody that they can or cannot build in a good neighborhood that's bringing a lot of tax base, has great schools. They're not interested in building here anymore. They're going to Edina. They're not choosing to build in a different neighborhood in Minneapolis. It's affecting so many people that I know it wasn't the intention of it to affect many people other than builders, but it is. It's affecting those people. It's affecting people that have rundown homes that they inherited or they've lived in themselves for a long time. They haven't done any maintenance. So now they've come to us saying, you know what, hey, we'd like to sell you our home. We know it's a tear down or a major renovation home. Now they have to look at potentially investing tens of thousands of dollars just to make their home saleable in a market where there is demand for that home already. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Martinetto. Then Ms. Gustafson and Ms. Miller are next.
Hi, my name is Jason Martinetto. I'm a realtor and a resident at 1221 28th Northeast Minneapolis. I also own a property in the Kenny neighborhood on 55th and Emerson. I sold that property 30 days ago, but due to the moratorium, I can no longer sell it. That was an investment of a property I made a number of years ago, and the market didn't allow me to sell it. The market did allow me to sell it this year, but no longer because of this decision. As a business owner and a realtor, I've had to conduct my business very differently over the last 10 years. Our market has gone up and down, and we've had a lot of hardships. But one thing I have done is looked at the market going out and how I'm going to have to adjust to that. The infill and the construction we're doing is because people want to build. That is not new. It has been growing year over year. There's been an ability to be able to respond to that more than just all of a sudden halting building and doing it. We've seen, as the original gentleman stated, $2 billion in permits over the last few years. There's a lot of revenue being generated that staff can be added. These issues can be studied and adjustments can be made in time. As a business owner, I have to adjust to the market. I request that the people that govern our markets also adjust in time. As you know, the neighborhood we're talking about, Ward 13, is a very desirable neighborhood. It's been that way for 30 years. We've seen building go up, we've seen building go down, but change is inevitable. And as our city changes, things have to change with it. And I'm grateful you've given me an opportunity to speak. I would just ask that give this some serious thought before you impose something that, you had the opportunity and the organizations had an opportunity to address in time as our market has adjusted and changed. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Ms. Gustafson, then Kristen Miller, John Crawford, and Sarah Peterson. And I can ask if folks could sort of start to line up so we can go a little quicker. And thank you for sticking to the 2 minutes.
Okay. Amy Gustafson, I'm a resident of the Sidna neighborhood, and I own a property in Linden Hills. I reside at 2921 Sunset Boulevard. I have had a rental property in Linden Hills for 14 years. It is a property that has become distressed. It is nearly 100 years old. It's got garage that's going to fall over. It's got foundational issues. It's got cracks in the walls letting rodents in because it's settling so poorly. I came to the conclusion that building a forever home for my family was by far the best option for me to move forward with that property and move forward for my family's needs. I had plans, unbeknownst to me, that this was such a big issue that already did things like were a wash in square footage for the total property, increase the green space dramatically, would reduce the heating costs dramatically. I had plans to recycle hardwood floors, utilize anything out of that house that I could, and I think improve the aesthetics of the neighborhood and add a property that actually will be better for the neighborhood. The issue for me is that as a rental property owner, I've given notice to tenants. As soon as I had the historical review completed, I did that in good faith to try to make it easier for my tenants to find new homes. Now I'm stuck with a place that I can't rent. I'm potentially going to lose rental income. I have a child that's going to start kindergarten in the fall. Even if I can get an exception and put my child in what would be my new neighborhood school, as a single mother, I don't know how I get that kid to school every day for up to a year. I would like to have you understand that this has definitely increased the vilification of neighbors and with neighbors. I am getting attacked by neighbors who are pro-moratorium and feel that they are, have the right to say things about my property and what I should build and what it should look like and how big it should be. Any delay is a hardship. Any delay, even a few months, means loss of income, and it makes me have to reevaluate this entire project and its economic feasibility and my ability to build my dream home, my forever home for my family. I should not have to spend the hours that I'm spending in community meetings and here today away from my children and away from my home and my work to protect my rights to do what I want to do on my property, and I hope you take that into consideration.
Thank you. Ms. Miller? Okay, let's move on to Mr. Crawford and then Sarah Peterson. And if Ms. Miller is here, she can speak later.
I'm sorry, I'm Kristen Miller.
Oh, perfect. Great.
I was just impressed by what Amy just said. Thank you for letting me speak my story here today. As I said, my name is Kristen Miller. I'm really nervous, so if I faint, I'm sorry. I drove here this morning from our current home in Baldwin, Wisconsin. This is the second time I've come to talk about how this situation is affecting us. I'm here because we have purchased this year our new property on 44th and York in Linden Hills. My family lived in Linden Hills for 11 years after we were first married. We lived in a little one-bedroom cottage, one of the original cottage city homes, not unlike the property that we just purchased on York. As our third child waited to make her way into this world, we outgrew our tiny home. We couldn't afford the homes in the neighborhood at that point, so we moved. My husband works in Minneapolis and has commuted since our move in 2001. Our plans hinge on having this house to live in. I have been working hard to make sure that our family can move in before this coming school year. I've talked to Ryan Fair at the school district a number of times and and Tiffany, and the day that we closed on this property, I brought down our deed to say, see, we will be a part of this community. And since the meeting on March 7th, it feels like we won't be. My first hope is that the moratorium will be lifted and that the city of Minneapolis will be proactive, not reactive. If not, I would like to speak on behalf of families like mine and Amy's. I urge you to consider, along with all of those in other hardship situations, those of us who are already well underway in this project of moving. As I have already stated in my letter to all council members on the day after the moratorium was put into effect, regarding the exemptions, the building permit is actually what seems to be the final step in this planning process. From the list of current exemptions, we do not qualify. Moving your family is a stressful event. We are in the midst of undoing our lives in rural Wisconsin. We're selling our horses. Oh, shoot. Okay. It's a big change, and we've already headed out on this well-planned journey, and suddenly our destination can't exist. So I'm wondering if maybe the Zoning and Planning Committee would allow us to park a gigantic RV in our lot. Think about that.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Mr. Crawford, then Sarah Peterson, Dan Murphy, and Amy Deckes.
Hello, my name is Sarah Peterson. I live at 4509 Drew Avenue South. I've had tear down across the street, one next door to me, and all happening at the same time right now, and one behind and back one. Several of those I definitely have scale concerns, but I do think some of that was addressed nicely, so I won't reiterate it. But definitely things not fitting on the lot well, let alone the neighborhood. I would also like to say I am planning a remodel that actually won't be impacted by the moratorium. So you will still get some additional tax revenue from that. So it's not a complete shutdown. Also, one of my biggest concerns outside of scale is the incredibly bad behavior of the developers. These are city lots. They're smaller lots. They have to work within those lot lines. They do not. I've had my property line invaded, plants taken out, trees taken out, and yet to be having that remediated. I have tried to address it with no response, except for patronization, and they're there, we'll handle it later. Well, the house is sold and has yet to be addressed. It needs to be what I want to replace, not what they want to slap in at cheapest cost, if they do it at all. I have suspicions that they won't. So it's a lot of the complete lack of addressing the lot lines and the property and the owners around. And also I find it interesting with a lot of the realtors. When I look at a lot of the infill that has happened over the last couple of years, because there have been many in my neighborhood, not just immediately, the value of those homes after they have sold have pretty much all decreased. So what is being initially sold is not being maintained. So I find that very interesting. But thank you for your time.
Thank you. Just want to make sure, was Mr. John Crawford here? Okay. Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Crawford. I've lived at 5104 Ewing Avenue South for 29 years. I'm retired, and one of the things that I want to say is the people in the neighborhood have made the neighborhoods. I hear about the builders saying this is a great place to move, and they have wonderful schools and stuff like that. But it's the people that live there that have made it this way, not the builders, not the people buying the new homes. And I think that the people need to be protected. And I like the idea of a moratorium. There's no reason for the big houses when the small houses, there's no reason for disrespect. There's no reason for blocking people's sunlight. There's no reason for any of that stuff whatsoever. And my speculation is simply that I think it's all about the money and who has the money and who can move into these neighborhoods. Well, that forces average income out of the neighborhoods, and they can't move there anymore because everything is way too expensive. How is this right? I don't care about the billions of dollars the city gets for new construction or whatever. It's the people that live in the city and lived in the city for years and years and years that have made the city, not the people coming in. And I think this needs to be addressed. And I think that it's very, very important that the people that have lived there are the ones that are respected. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we have Dan Murphy, then Amy Deckes, Allie Deckes, and then Kathy, whose name I can't read.
just left.
Okay, so Mr. Murphy has left. Amy Deckis. And then Allie Deckis, Kathy Gall, maybe, Jane Cannon, Rich Nyquist.
Hi, my name is Amy Deckis. I work at the 50th and France office of Edina Realty, 4999 France Avenue South. I'm just here to discuss a couple of things. As everybody's getting up and talking, it seems to me that what we are dealing with here is an enforcement issue, and Minneapolis has set these rules and regulations and zoning standards, and the good builders are out there following them. So it just does not seem fair that for those people who are following the regulations and the rules, these are your rules. They're trying to do the best they can to stay within your guidelines. The bad actors need to be fined. That's also a regulation issue. You need to enforce the rules that you have put in place. And in the meantime, let those of us who have moved forward on that basis continue to move forward and not be held hostage by a moratorium. Yes, there are problems, and they can be addressed and they can be solved, but they can be solved over time. The city of Edina had more than twice as many tear downs last year. And they were able to, and it wasn't painless, but they were able to adopt new ordinances and building codes without stopping things. There are people's lives, livelihoods on the line. I just hired my daughter. My sisters are both in this business. We have a great stake in these neighborhoods, and it isn't fair to stop and ask us to stop doing the very things that you have put into place. The city needs to regulate and enforce and fine those people who are bad actors. Put them on the list. They don't get to build more houses here. So I just ask you to consider, it's not if that building is going to continue or not. It's how. I understand that. But don't hold us hostage with our livelihoods.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Allie Deckis? No, okay. So then we have Kathy Gall. Okay. Then we are on Jane Conan, then Rich Nyquist, Diane Jensen, and Nick Smobby.
Hi, I'm Jane Conan. I live at 5357 Ewing. I'm on the Fulton Neighborhood Association and on the zoning board there. Also, I want to put a plug in for the Blend Awards. The Fulton Neighborhood Association established the Blend Awards 7 or 8 years ago for houses that are being built in the neighborhood to blend into the neighborhood. We continue forward with the Blend Awards, trying to put some carrots out there for the builders for better housing within the neighborhood. The code does need to be updated. Fulton Neighborhood also has guidelines that what we've discovered on the zoning board is that we have about zero influence in what goes into the neighborhood. Enforcement needs to be improved of all the building that's going on. There's definitely too much influence, or more needs to be done. There's too much that's influencing on the neighbors. But all that being said, I don't believe the moratorium is the right way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nyquist? I'll just note we have about 20 more people who would like to speak.
All right, my name is Richard Nyquist. I live at 5357 Ewing Avenue South, and I'm standing to support the moratorium, its intent to just review the impact that the additional demand on services, the city services, is doing to our city as well as the neighborhood with the contractor activity.
Thank you. Ms. Jensen?
Hello, I'm Diane Jensen. I live in Fulton at 5349 Drew Avenue South, and I am in support of the moratorium. I have lived the last 18 months under constant construction on my block. and the system is broken and needs to be fixed. Mr. Wittenberg mentioned construction site management. That's a big issue that needs to be addressed, and frankly, inspections has not been helpful in enforcing the things that are already on the books. Mr. Wittenberg talked about zoning standards. We need a fresh look. We certainly do. Right now, there is no requirement for an as-built survey at the end of construction. So when the lot grade had been changed next to me, the erosion control plan said that it would drain east towards the alley, west toward the street. It now drains north towards my house. Inspection said, well, we don't have an as-built survey, we don't have the money to get one. We think it's okay. I have water in my basement. Oh, well, we'll make them make some changes. I had the inspector's manager, his manager, and his manager, the director of plan review, to my property. And I was told by the director of plan review that yes, they couldn't confirm that the elevation were changed, but clearly it didn't meet the intent of the erosion control plan, and that an order or a letter would be written to the builder to tell them to fix it. A couple of months later, when I talked to the inspector and said, where's the order, where's the letter, he said, I'm not going to do it. What is the citizen supposed to do? The city needs to have the proper standards in place, and then they need to enforce them. And it's a train out of control, and I think we should stop and fix it. And 1 year isn't as long as a year and a half.
Thank you. Next, Nick Smabby, then Kiko Vassie, Pat Wells, Consuelo Craven.
Hi, my name is Nick Smaby. I'm a resident of Fulton, live at 2515 West 52nd Street, grew up in the Southwest neighborhood, went to Southwest High School. My two kids went to Southwest High School, and my wife taught in the public schools. I also happen to be president of Choice Wood Company, a design-build company that's been around for 30 years. In the course of that 30 years, we estimate conservatively that we have done 150 projects in Southwest Minneapolis at an average cost, if you will, of somewhere between $200,000 and $250,000 apiece. We did a little math, not accurate to the penny, but I think just with respect to that body of work, 150 projects over 30 years, the increase in property taxes just from our little company has been somewhere north of $8 million. That's just the increase. I think we sit here with very short memories, and I would like to refresh some memories. 3 or 4 years ago, on nearly every block in the 13th Ward, there was a foreclosed upon house sitting empty. From 2005 to 2009, there were 279 foreclosures in the 13th Ward. Property values, on average, diminished by 34% on average. Do the math on that. In every house, in Minneapolis, essentially. And the impact on people like me who are in the housing business, we saw unemployment rates of 20, 30, 40, 50%, that sort of thing.
Sir, it's been 2 minutes.
I'm done?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. I'm opposed to the moratorium.
Okay. Ms. Vesey, then Mr. Pat Wells, Consuelo Craven. Is Kiko Vesey here? Okay, let's move on to Pat Wells. I'm sorry? Oh, We'll have Mr. Pat Wells go, and then you next. Right after Mr. Wells. Thank you.
Don't worry, you'll get your chance. I'm Pat Wells. I'm not necessarily a resident of Minneapolis, but I'm here to kind of voice my opinion on 9865 Brent Avenue, Inver Grove Heights. I work with a local construction company that I'm a lumber guy, okay? So I supply all the materials for this person. Over the past 5 or 6 years, as well, you may know, the construction industry has been devastated. Now the industry is finally coming back after a couple of years, and now the moratorium wants to take that away from us. It not only affects me, my personal income, it affects the lumber company's income, it affects the plumber, the electrician, even the shops in Minneapolis, for where those guys go for lunch. They stop at the local gas station, get gas, get a coffee. It affects that. So not only does it, you know, when you look at the total picture, you're affecting a large number of people. I realize I've been in this industry for 34 years, and God, I hope I never have to go through another downturn, because it's tough. It's very difficult. That was the worst downturn I've ever seen. In 1980, early 80s, interest rates were above 18, 19%. That was tough. This last downturn was even worse. So now you want to detract and go back to that? Maybe not totally, but you do affect a large amount of people. I know that the homeowners here have issues. Heck, if I lived next to these people and there was trash in my yard, I'd be disappointed too. But that's only a select few of contractors. The guys that I work with are very clean, very conscious of their neighbors. It's not everyone.
Thank you. That time is up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Craven. Yes. And then after that, Constance Pepin, Terry Pearson, William Wells. And if folks could please line up to move things along more quickly. Thank you.
I have so little to say that I am going to try to speak softly because I do not understand most of the people. I live at 4011 Washburn Avenue South. I turned 90 on July 4th, and I have lived in my house half that time. I am a divorcee and a widow with 2 past husbands. Lost them both, and somebody said, "How careless of you." The house next to me is a virtual tear down, which means it was built during a loophole, which means part of the building was left standing and the rest was torn down. I am for the moratorium, of course. It's too late for me. I'm here for others. The owner next to me, and I have nothing against him, I'm just mentioning the statistics, bought the house for $110,000 in 1998 and has been building it for 16 years this May. Wait a minute, there's a joke here. It is not yet habitable nor inhabited. The neighbors call it the forever house. I have somebody in the stamp business. My son is a letter carrier, retiring after 30 years this year. So I am for the moratorium, and I'm doing it for other people. Was I clear or not?
Thank you.
I couldn't hear half of what everyone else said. I'm sorry.
Should we just give the rest of the time to Ms. Craven? Thank you. Constance Pepin.
Yes, my name is Constance Pepin. I live at 4031 Zenith Avenue South. I've lived in Linden Hills for 30 years, and I want to thank you all very much for passing the moratorium on single-family home construction in order to protect and expedite a planning process to address residents' growing concerns about runaway teardowns. I believe this moratorium is a necessary, responsible, and appropriate response to the crisis in my ward. in which rampant development has clearly overwhelmed the city's capacity to ensure responsible growth through regulation and enforcement. The moratorium gave me hope that you are listening and you do care, not just about increasing tax revenue, but about residents and the quality of our neighborhoods and our city as a whole. Linden Hills and other Ward 13 neighborhoods are experiencing unprecedented and virtually unregulated growth, and we need the leadership that you showed in passing the moratorium. The moratorium provides a reasonable means to identify and implement needed changes now before our neighborhoods are forever and negatively altered by unchecked and sometimes illegal and unethical development at great cost to residents and the environment. The development process must be improved in a way that respects various constituencies and balances competing needs and interests. Before the moratorium, I felt powerless as builders have increasingly exploited our neighborhoods for short-term profit without accountability or regard for the consequences to our homes and communities. An inordinate amount of city resources are needed to deal with the problem. And as you know, the taxable value of new construction homes comes with high costs for the infrastructure. Allowing unchecked development adversely affects not only residents in the neighborhood, but the entire city when our infrastructure is overwhelmed, regulatory procedures fail, and our environment suffers. It's not just about protecting our neighborhoods that are so desirable for that sake, but protecting the city's ability to ensure basic and affordable services for all residents. I find it unfortunate that some opponents have mischaracterized this moratorium as an overreaction or economic hardship or a violation of property rights. Those mischaracterizations do a disservice to all of us by distorting the issues and creating false choices. Please don't allow more moneyed and organized interests to push aside our legitimate concerns as residents. I'm counting on you to continue your support for the moratorium. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry Pearson, then William Wells, Dan McConnell, Mike Anderson.
Hi, excuse me. My name is Terry Pearson, and I live at 2110 Cedar Lake Parkway. My son lives on 48th and Thomas, and I've lived in the Lyndhurst area my entire life, but now I live on Cedar Lake Parkway, and I'm here because it was too late for me. I am the house next to a really big home that sits on the corner on Cedar Lake Parkway. I have no sun in my house anymore. It's completely shaded and shadowed. I'm also here for my neighbors. Our alley is ice because, again, there's no sun that can even come in the alley. It was built with some loopholes, so it came into a hill and then it went higher. There were walls built that were supposedly fines, but fines were paid and walls were left. So this is my community. This is our community. These are the people who live there. This is my home, just as it's their home, but this is my home that I live in too. And I would love these people to be part of our community, but that hasn't happened. And if you go along Cedar Lake Parkway, you'll see it isn't Lake of the Isles. The other bigger home might be on Lake of the Isles, the Polat home or the Lake Calhoun. It isn't even part of our neighborhood, and it happened. And what I'm saying now is it's too late for me, but something needs to be done. Edina's doing it. Other places are doing it. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Councilmember Bender. I'm an architect. I live in South Minneapolis. My name is William Wells. My address is 2838 Fremont Avenue South. I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank staff and thank you for looking at the point system as it applies to 1, 2, 3, and 4 unit residential developments. I want to tell you, over 10 years of experience of doing residential construction in Minneapolis, that the point system is a very difficult system that does not let the architectural community design towards the issues of a given neighborhood. So what staff is saying is correct, and I'm looking forward to working with you and the city council member in this area over the next couple years, or next year, sorry, to work with you on this issue. I wanted to show you something. Could you put the so the council member in this area could see this. The point system itself is broken in a couple different directions. While we might say that homes that are too big are being built in the area, I wanted to show you that this is a client that approached my office that wanted to build a 1-story slab-on-grade house with an attached garage because the owner was in a wheelchair, this house cannot be built in the city of Minneapolis under the current point system, which requires a detached garage or a full basement. All of the points are given towards those issues. So while architects may come in with other house designs that address issues of stormwater management, accessibility, we can't do it under the current point system. So I'd like to work with Jason Wittenberg and Mr. Poor on improving the point system so the point system works for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan McConnell, then Mike Anderson, Robert Zabasina. Thank you. Tim Fullock. And if folks could line up, we will move things along. We have about 10 more people to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dan McConnell, 3317 47th Avenue South in the 2nd Ward, representing the Minneapolis Building Trades Council. I just want to make clear that we do not support the moratorium. As you know, we like to build things in the Building Trades Council. We do, however, applaud the City Council's efforts to rein in bad actors, and really appreciate that and look forward to working with you guys on this issue and other issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
Hi, my name is Mike Anderson. I live on 53rd and Irving, and I currently live in the dark next to a house that looks like it belongs in Plymouth. They've removed all the trees. It's definitely affected the value of my house. And then on the other side, I live next to a 25-foot hole that's unprotected. It's been sitting there for 6 months, and I don't really see any action on it, and nobody seems to want to enforce anything. But anyway, it's too late for me, so I'm here for the other 16,000 homes that hopefully don't have to deal with what I've dealt with picking up the trash, the noise, working at 10, 11 o'clock at night. So I'm definitely in support of some kind of pause, because there has to be a better way to do business than what I'm seeing. But what I'm seeing on the positive side, there's a contractor by the name Kerrigan Construction, and she's done like 8 projects on the block, and she seems to win all the bids because she's the opposite of my 2 neighbors who just laugh at all the regulations. So the city comes out and they know that they can just say whatever they want to, whatever the city people want to hear, and they'll just go away. So that's been my experience. What else? Some of the other problems is just, the nails in the alley, the blocking the driveways, blocking the sidewalks. The guy that tore down the house on the north side of me, no notice to anybody, so all my windows were open. All my hockey gear was out in the back drying out after being washed. The worst part is he actually dropped the sidewall on my house. So the entire sidewall came down on my house while I'm in the bathroom. So anyway, no apology, no nothing. And there's got to be a better way of doing business, and the lady that I see doing it right is Kerrigan, so if we can copy what she does, I think we can be farther ahead.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Zarbasina, I'm saying it wrong still. Robert? Yes, sorry. Then Tim Fullock, Martha Hewitt, Linda Varvel, Jonathan Mark.
Good morning. My name is Robert Zaracina. I'm here representing my son Matthew, who's gained some rather interesting notoriety of late. He purchased a property at 4205 Xerxes Avenue South, and it relates to a statement in your FAQs concerning quality homes will survive into the next generation. We don't think this one will survive the year. Can I have the overhead projector, please? Basically, what we did here is took some pictures, and if you'll notice that none of the doors fit the frames anymore because the structure itself is rapidly shifting. If you look at the lower left photo, you can see that the support beam here, the pole, is listing to the right and the walls are listing to the left. Perhaps you can come by the house, walk down the stairs, and tell me which way they're headed. In addition, when you look at the upstairs in the upper right-hand corner, if you put a marble up in this corner, it will actually run down the floor with wild abandon from the upper right to the lower left. You also mentioned in your FAQs that the soil there does not hold moisture very well. Here's proof of that fact. If you look at the lower photo, you can find out what the real problem is that the foundation and the walls have fractured. As you know, when water freezes, it will expand the gap and make things worse. So when this thaws out and the spring and summer rains come, we expect this building to deteriorate very, very rapidly. In addition, the garage suffers the same fate. You might be interested to know that Matt's structure fits the architectural style of the community. It blends in quite well. It meets all zoning standards without variance, and the neighbors are very excited because now they have a structure that somebody will live in which has been uninhabited for over 4 years. So we're asking the committee to pass an exemption without delay so we can continue to remove this hazard. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Ms. Tim Fullock?
Hello, my name is Tim Fuller. I'm a practicing architect. I've been working in the residential arena for over 20 years. I'm not currently a resident of Minneapolis, but I'm here on behalf of the AIA Minneapolis chapter and representing over 1,200 members. And I'd like to read a brief statement if I could. The moratorium in Minneapolis has brought needed attention to construction practices and urban residential design issues. As AIA member firms and architects in Minneapolis, we bring a long-term perspective, aspiring to design enduring and contextual homes that add to the richness of the urban fabric. Driven by a code of ethics and deep-seated values, we have a professional responsibility that applies equally to our community and to our clients. We have all seen the detrimental effects these issues can cause in our communities. And while we agree with Councilmember Palmisano that reform is needed, this moratorium creates problems that run counter to our shared goals. These concerns are not new in urban planning, and there are many precedents for how to address them. We hope that the Minneapolis City Council draws on past collaborative successes reforming zoning and construction rules in Minneapolis and beyond. These efforts altered regulations efficiently and without need for a moratorium, and they include a strong quorum of all stakeholders. This short-circuiting of measured public process has resulted in adversarial relationships rather than cooperative ones. Moving forward, we hope we can address the issues together as a community in a way that is sensitive to the interests of everyone affected while preserving the long-term goals of the city. As the process unfolds, we encourage the City Council and CPED staff to use AIA Minneapolis as a resource for developing strategies to reshape regulations and codes in ways that address the concerns of all involved parties. We offer our expertise as the Council crafts ordinances that limit infractions while also encouraging quality contextual design. Together, as a community, we believe we can turn development pressures into opportunities to create public policy that will preserve and enrich the unique and vibrant qualities of our great Minneapolis neighborhoods for generations to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Martha Hewitt, then we'll have Linda Varvel, Jonathan Mark, Kurt Gunsbury, and Kathy Hendrickson.
Hi, Martha Hewitt. I live at 5124 Vincent Avenue South. I've lived there since 1992. I live next door to an infill. I live 4 houses down from another infill. I live across the alley from a couple more infills and across the street from and down from an infill. I'm in favor of the moratorium because I feel like it's the only thing that has gotten the developers and contractors' attention. The issues, as far as I'm concerned, are the size of the houses, the construction process, and the preservation of trees. On the, I would like to say that it's been said that a lot of people in the neighborhood don't want the neighborhood to change, and I'm fine with infill. I think it's great for the tax base. I think we need new construction. It's too big. I mean, I guess the question is, do existing homeowners have any right to daylight or not? Because with the existing homes, they are not getting that. And the infill that's going in next to us, which fortunately for us is on our north side, it's a completely flat street, and that their first floor is about 2 feet higher than our first floor. Why does it need to be 2 feet higher? Maybe it's cheaper, maybe it's convenient, but necessary? I don't know. So I think we do have zoning in Minneapolis, and we're not saying that we don't want construction. We're saying we want the construction to fit. In terms of fitting on the lot, there was a lumber guy here. One of the first things they did on our property was drop a whole load of trusses on our brand new fence, because the guy tried for about 2 or 3 hours to deliver the load, and he came to the front door afterward and he said, it's just the lot's too small, I can't get it in there. Recently, a backhoe parked his back bucket on our shrubs because he said, due to the sequencing of construction, there was no way he could dig for the water lines without parking part of his equipment on our yard. So it's not just the houses are too big, they're cutting out people's daylight, but also they don't even fit on the lot during the construction process. There's, so anyway, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Linda Varvel, and I live at 5124 Vincent as well. And many people have said so many good things, and I just support them all in favor of the moratorium, because I really feel like the builders really didn't pay attention until the moratorium. And I can assure you that if the moratorium stops, you will get a run on these new builds so fast your head's going to spin. And in the meantime, the changes that have to come in the city to get inspectors in there and really stop it when it's happening, and the fines have to be immediately assessed, and they have to be a lot higher, because these people pay attention to the bottom line and to money. The size is a problem. We passed the one in 2007 that was supposed to control height. They got around, at least our builder got around it by making the foundation higher. And so that doesn't build my trust for them understanding the intention of the ordinance and the intention of what we need. And one of the things that in the Fulton neighborhood meeting, one of the builders said was, it's time for City Hall to catch up with the real world. And I'm like, well, I'm a part of the real world. And a lot of people in these neighborhoods that have lived there for 30 years, like I have, go to jobs every day, and they can't get there as fast as the builders to argue these things and to change these things. The real world is slower, and you're faster in the real world. So it's like we've got to really get to the table, and we are at the table. Thank you, Linnea.
Thank you. Jonathan Mack, then Kurt Gunsbury, Kathy Hendrickson, Jeff Williams. Just want to remind folks, we care a lot about what everyone has to say. If you're repeating something that's been said, try to keep your remarks short, and you don't have to use your 2 minutes. We still have about 15 people who would like to speak.
Jonathan Mack, 4865 East Lake Harriet Parkway, and please bear with me because this is the first time I've tried to speak publicly while utilizing reading glasses. I'm not a builder, I'm not a realtor, I'm not planning on selling my home, I'm not planning on any teardowns or building it. But perhaps the most troubling aspect of the moratorium is its overbreadth and its disregard for the differing circumstances of sub-neighborhoods and homeowners within the affected neighborhoods. The new ordinance applies irrespective of the size of the lot, the size of the replacement home or the existing home, or the distance from the neighbor's home. There is absolutely no problem on larger lots. And the ordinance could easily have been more narrowly tailored to apply to lots that are, say, less than 1/5 of an acre or less than 1/4 of an acre or whatever you should choose. There are vast swaths of the affected neighborhoods in which there aren't many teardowns. I don't think there's been a single teardown within, say, the closest 300 or 400 homes to mine. If you look at the dots that we looked at on the map earlier, the problem is concentrated in Linden Hills and part of Fulton. Parts of the affected area, East Lyndhurst, for example, have had very few teardowns. Nevertheless, we were using a blunt instrument and a blanket moratorium where sensitivity and nuance would have served the public interest better. That homeowners can apply for variances is of little solace. A significant restriction on the use of property reduces its market value especially when the restriction is on the most economically viable use. Buyers who might want to have the option of building or replacing home will be disinclined to buy. Am I done on time? The last point, the 1 year period is not a saving grace either, because it sets a precedent of tinkering with the market, which will, in fact, property values for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hendrickson. Kathy Hendrickson. I want to remind people to please state their address for the record.
My name is Kathy Hendrickson, and I live at 4805 James Avenue South in the Lyndhurst neighborhood. And I cannot thank you enough, sir, for your prior comments. I am adamantly opposed to the blanket moratorium that has been imposed on us. Not everyone is the bad guy, and I'm not here to debate big house, little house. I'm here to debate process. The moratorium shut down everyone, those that follow the rules, those that don't follow the rules. I've lived in Southwest Minneapolis since 2001. I've been searching for a home to rebuild for my family since then. I have been living at 4805 James Avenue since June of 2010, carefully planning our rebuild. I have employed an architect who has lived in Southwest Minneapolis, who works in Southwest Minneapolis, and I have carefully crafted a home. We were 3 weeks from pulling permits. This has almost been a 8 years in the works. We were 3 weeks from pulling permits, and you have shut us down. And it's not fair. I am not here to debate that if change needs to happen. I'm here to debate that stopping and halting everyone is not the answer and not the right process. This is our lot. We would like to rebuild almost the existing home. We could go up a second story. We could double the size of our home on our lot. And that's not our choice. I've lived in the home for 3.5 years to see how we fit into the neighborhood, to see how we use the space. And now we could have pulled permits 3 weeks ago. Our documents are far enough along. And now you're asking us. And also I'd like to know in the waiver, who is going to determine my hardship?
Thank you. Your time is up. Thank you. Okay, Jeff Williams. Is Mr. Williams here? Then Edna Brasnace. Oh, sorry. Oh, no problem.
Kurt Gunsbury.
Oh, yes, sorry. Kurt Gunsbury.
Hi. My son's made some signs today. We tried to keep them straightforward and clear. We're not here to cause a stir. My name is Kurt Gunsbury. I live in Sydney right now at 2609 Burnham Road. I lived in Fulton for 12 years up until last year. We sold our home to a couple with 3 children who are moving into it and want to renovate it. Our neighbors across the street want to tear down their house and build a new house and reinvest in the city. My partners and I build in the city. In the past 5 years, we've built over 700 units of new green housing. Our latest project transformed an underutilized former city parking ramp into Minneapolis' first LEED Gold certified multifamily building. We've been called the gold standard for building in Minneapolis. I've also argued with several of you. All the stories we've heard are true, all of them today, but they're also all problematic. I have only one concern about what's going on. This process has not been thoughtful. It has not engaged all stakeholders in the city, and it has not been transparent at all. As we've heard, this moratorium does not and will not change how the city enforces rules. We will continue to have many problems enforcing rules. We're a diverse city, construction is complicated, lots are tight. It's going to get tighter, guys. We're going to have more people in the city. There's more people that want to live here. My question is, Do you really want to divide our community with such a thoughtless measure? Please vote down this moratorium and provide better leadership for long-term solutions. And please make the process transparent. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm noticing more applause in between people speaking. I just would ask you to refrain from that so we can keep moving on and make sure everyone gets heard. So I believe I have Jeff Williams next. Oh, okay, come on up then.
Madam Chair, committee members, my name is Edna Brasidas. I live at 4 Grove Street in a multifamily building in the 3rd Ward. I urge the committee to adopt the staff findings and sustain the moratorium. Part of this is because I attended a national seminar a few years ago, and one of the segments was on the issue of teardowns. In that, city staff from the village of Hinsdale spoke about their experiences. If you don't know about Hinsdale, it's a small, affluent suburb with good schools, a delightful community close to the city. The city staff person said that if she had it to do all over again, she would have put in place measures that would have prevented the teardowns. She did an economic study, as Councilmember Andrew Johnson is suggesting, and found out that the money that the city made was eclipsed by the costs that they had to pay to support all this new construction. 30% of Hinsdale has been torn down and rebuilt. And she said, when you're in it, though, it's 1 or 2 houses, and you can't, it moves so fast that you can't see it until all the damage is done. That's why you need a moratorium. You have to step in and stop it. Otherwise, this damage will happen. Now, Hinsdale isn't Minneapolis, and there's things that are different here, but there's a wide body of literature that I've seen that people have studied this and they've learned of it. I believe it's appropriate to have our competent city staff to study it and to find out what these issues are and to keep us from having a city that's sort of torn down and rebuilt in a haphazard fashion. There are also very important environmental issues that city staff brought up. The greenest building is the one that we already have. There is a real issue with putting all this torn down houses in landfill. And there's good jobs in remodeling, and some of those may be better to be incentive. You have issues with trees. And the issues with groundwater in South Minneapolis is very important to all us who drink. Well, thank you very much, and I hope that you will support the moratorium.
Thank you. We have Chuck Sullivan, then Clarence Falk, Tim Princeton, Tom Mackey.
Good morning. I'm Chuck Sullivan. My wife and I are longtime residents, 37 years at in Linden Hills, 3829 Xerxes Avenue South. I had nice prepared remarks, but unfortunately, those of you who know I talk a little more than I should, I've had to pare them down. We support the moratorium, both my wife and I. We've been there. We've changed our neighborhood. The neighborhood is changing around us. Change is not bad. I'm an architect. I've worked with the city looking for positive solutions. The time we are asking you to take and spend to develop a moratorium, I think is the time we need to take a breather. The moratorium, the conversation about the moratorium has brought many people to the table. I look around, I hear different voices. I think those voices all have a chance to participate in the change. A lot of what has been talked about is data that is kind of, there's been no hard data produced with that data. Somebody just raised the question, how many of these houses are actually houses built for a client, or how many are spec houses? I think that would be an interesting thing, of these 63 or 64 teardowns. Another question that came up is, how many of these houses that are torn down are truly houses that needed repair? I'll give you an example. In my neighborhood, 3840 Washburn, prior to the moratorium, was advertised at $549,009, 8050, I think 8,050 square feet, was advertised as a teardown. That's sort of difficult to understand. I'd like to say one more thing, if I may show 2 photographs. This photograph is of a house that's near me, and I just want to make a point. If you look at the stairs, The stairs leading up that, there are 11 stairs, which approximate 7 inches, 77 inches. The house to the south has 3.5, about 24 inches. The house to the south of that has about 30 inches. To the north, there are 3 stairs, a little less than 3 stairs, about 20 inches. And out the lookout windows and this was accepted as a solution. The last one, and I will leave, is of the alley behind, which look at the pile of dirt that was brought in that is from another site, spent the winter there, and the water that's in the alley that exists. And I just hit 0 or came close to it.
Thank you. Thank you. Clarence Falk, then Tim Princeton, Tom Meckie, Patrick Clemens, Tim Quigley.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Clarence Falk. I live at 4144 Ewing Avenue South in Linden Hills. Thank you for doing this moratorium. We're finally getting some respect. We're no longer being a punching bag for every developer or whomever comes into our neighborhood, and we've got their attention. That's all good. The only criticism I might have of the moratorium is calling it a moratorium. It's kind of like cancer. I don't like that word. Timeout would have been better. That's what my grandkids get when they're bad, and that's what we're talking about, bad behavior here, bad behavior. In fact, there were 11 architects that wrote an article in the paper a couple of days ago, that'd be the Star Tribune, and they pretty much agreed with the fact that this is bad behavior that we're seeing. They had a list of suggestions, and I thought they were quite appropriate for most of them, a bit vague, quite a few a bit vague, but on the whole, I think that's a good start to direction that we're going on this moratorium. Here's what I'd like to propose as a list of suggestions, maybe a checklist, that reflects what was a hot button issue in last fall's election. There were people upset about what was going on, and this is the culmination of it, what you're seeing here with this moratorium. Well, number one, the architect suggested a geotechnical report. Oh, I'm not smart enough to figure out what that is, but I am assuming it means core borings to see what the soil is like. We have got a house on 39th and Drew that is what I would call the great white whale. It's a whale because it's sitting in water. We had water running down the street last year for the length of the summer. So a checklist. Who did the borings? Who checked the soil? The name of the contractor. And all this ought to be in there along with the permit so we can see it. I love the idea of transparency. Great. Wonderful.
Thank you, sir. That's time.
I have got a whole bunch more items on my checklist. I just want to make sure that the homeowners that are coming in here get radon remediation and asbestos remediation should go in before these teardowns because we've all had to do it.
Thank you. Tim Princeton, then Tom Meckie, Patrick Clemens, Tim Quigley, Matt Moaning, and Fred Mayer.
Chair Bender, council members, I live in East Calhoun, 1621 West 31st Street. I would consider it sort of the heart of Uptown. Arguably the most active residential construction area in Minneapolis. I live with construction surrounding my neighborhood every day and have since the Edgewater started putting in sheet pilings about 10 years ago and shook my house for a month. So I let you know this because I want you to know I'm familiar with the pain of construction. It is painful. And I understand the concerns that the neighbors in the affected area have, and I'm sympathetic to those. The construction industry has clearly failed to self-police, and that's a shame. That being said, a moratorium is a planning tool that should be used as a last result. A moratorium is a de facto taking of property rights and should not be taken lightly. I would encourage the council to table the ordinance for 6 months, while a working group can be established to implement changes to the code related to increased enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Meckie, then Patrick Clemens, Tim Quigley, Matt Moaning, Fred Mayer.
Hi, my name is Tom Meckie. I live at 4912 James Avenue South in Lyndhurst. I've been a Lyndhurst resident for 10 years, and I recently built my home. And this has been an interesting subject to follow the last couple of weeks. I've had the opportunity to go to many of the neighborhood association meetings and listen to the debate. I think it's all been good. I acknowledge and agree that changes absolutely do need to be implemented. My question is why a moratorium? to implement those changes. I like to look at numbers. I studied 18 homes that sold in 2012, what they paid in taxes then versus what they pay now. Those 18 homes that were built in the ward in 2012, their property taxes went up by about 225%. So basically they went from 69,000 in total on those 18,000 homes, or 18 homes, to about 270,000. If what we have is an enforcement issue, why can't we work with the zoning and planning department to reallocate some of those funds being generated by the increased taxes to higher resources to police this better? Another question that I have is with regard to the parameters of the ordinance. I would challenge you to consider that a remodel less than 1,500 square feet is going to have the same issues with dumpsters, with debris. Somebody can go into a house that's less than 1,500 square feet and gut it, and you're going to have all of the trades coming into that property, creating all the same issues. So it just seems like there's not some balance to it. I'm keeping my eye on the shot clock here. I'll keep it to 2. The real issue here, and I support the study. I just think the method of a moratorium and halting all business might be a little overreaching. I would encourage you to engage with the builders in the room, the architects in the room. They're bright people. They can offer a lot to help curb this in, I think, a shorter period of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick Clemens, Tim Quigley, Matt Moaning, Fred Mayer.
Good afternoon, I believe. Patrick Clemens, 5113 Gorgas Avenue, 13-year resident of the city of Minneapolis. I have 3 children who attend Clara Barton Open School. I am also a small home builder. I would like to make 2 points in asking you to reconsider the moratorium. Before doing so, I would just like to address a couple of comments that have been made in the open forum, in particular between Mr. Wittenberg and I believe Councilmember Goodman, who had asked about if there are any measures that have been taken with regard to understanding the specifics of neighborhoods. I would argue, for example, that the introduction of the gross floor area calculation in addition to lot coverage, which really addresses the issue of above grade mass, is a metric by which some control of house size has already been mediated. Secondly, anyone who's filed a new construction application with the city realizes that the city solicits elevations, front, rear, and side of the subject property, as well as the 4 neighborhood surrounding properties. I would also make note that this has been referred to as an unregulated or an unchecked process. A new construction application with the city of Minneapolis measures approximately 3/4 of an inch to 7/8 of an inch thick. There's a lot of data that goes into these things. There's a lot of thought that goes into these things. And last, I would just say, mention about lot lines and water. There's also erosion control permits and site plan that has to be developed by the builder in order to be submitted and approved by the city. 2 points in asking you to reconsider. Mr. Wittenberg also mentioned that you can leave a wall and still not have a tear down permit, a wrecking permit. That's not true. In 2013, the city changed the rule by which if you touch more than 60% of the surface, you need to get a tear down application. They did this without enacting a moratorium. It was a significant change and it was achieved. Lastly, I would say that a moratorium has a huge destabilizing factor on the market. We have clients that look to rebuild within their existing neighborhoods as well as move into them. A lot of them have small children. And I think that rather than working through it as a process with builders, city officials, and homeowners, simply instituting a moratorium shows that the city of Minneapolis and its leadership is not prepared for housing in the 21st century. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Quigley, Matt Moaning, and then Mr. Mayer.
My name is Tim Quigley. I live at 3200 West Calhoun Parkway. I'm a 35-year resident of the city of Minneapolis, formerly lived in Fulton. And I am opposed to the moratorium. I think it's a blunt, heavy-handed instrument that's indiscriminate in its application and ought to be reconsidered by your group. I am personally thrilled to see the redevelopment and the dynamism going on in residential Minneapolis. This is exactly what this city needs. If the city doesn't change, if we just put a circle around it and batten down the hatches, the city's going to die. For years and years and years in my old neighborhood, people would move in. As soon as they had kids, out they'd go because the housing stock was outmoded, it was too small, and no one was willing to have the courage to reinvest in it. Now that's going on. We should embrace this. Families are clamoring to come into Minneapolis. It's good for the tax base. Frankly, it's good for sustainability. The existing houses, sad to say, are outmoded in many, many respects. Many of them are cute. I'm actually a preservationist, an architectural historian. But these houses, I lived in one, had the sports page for insulation. It had a 1935 boiler. They're energy hogs, by and large. The new houses, 80% more efficient. That's the sustainable future that we should be embracing. And I urge you to do the same. Also, at first, I was outraged by this as an architect and as an urban designer and a neighborhood advocate. Then I realized, to my chagrin, that good friends of mine who plan to build a new house in East Lyndhurst are actually caught in this dilemma. They, too, are 35-year residents of South Minneapolis. They happen to be doing volunteer work in Kenya right now. They have rented out their house, packed away their belongings, and expect to move in at Christmas time to their new house. All those plans changed as of 2 weeks ago.
Thank you. Thanks. Mr. Moaning, then Mr. Mayor. Please hold your applause. I just want to remind everyone we are being very generous with the time. We want to make sure we hear everyone, but please try to refrain from repeating things that have already been said, and we want to make sure we have time for the committee to discuss this important issue.
You bet. Well, good afternoon, Chair Bender, members of the committee. My name is Matt Moaning. I live at 4652 Drew Avenue South. If you look at the map that was up earlier, my house is right in the heart of all this construction. So I know very well what it feels like to have this going on around me. I want to make 3 points. And the first is one that a lot of the speakers just covered. A moratorium is not needed to address the issues that we face surrounding the nuisance of construction, the zoning issues, and the environmental issues. I've heard a lot of talk about this today, and I actually share these concerns, and a lot of people that I've talked to in my neighborhood and that we've heard at neighborhood meetings share these concerns. These people are now at the table. They want to make improvements. A moratorium is not necessary to get these done. The second point is I'm really concerned about the message the moratorium sends. First, to folks outside of the city thinking about moving here or doing business. This putting on a moratorium is taking away a property right, and it's done. It's been done pretty quickly. If we say to outside businesses, we will act quickly when we have problems to do something so extreme, that puts up a big caution sign. That's problematic. The second is this sends a really bad message to the families that are thinking about moving here and that already live here. I see sheets of the addresses where these teardowns have occurred. These aren't just addresses, these are families, and I happen to know quite a few of them. And now what we're saying is there's a stigma associated with you. You're not as good as we are. We're better than you are. That's a really bad message. We need new families to move to our community. We want that. They'll reinvigorate the community. Let's send the message that we want you and need you. And the third point, and final point is, this is troubling economic policy. We're just getting ourselves out of the worst recession we've had in decades, since the Great Depression. The industry hit the hardest was that of construction. There is tens of millions of dollars of economic activity going on in Southwest Minneapolis, and a lot of it is labor. It's the trades, the plumbers, the electricians, the carpenters. Why are we going to put them out of work to achieve this goal? It's just not necessary. So I ask you to consider these points before you make your final vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and please no applause. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Fred Mayer. I live at 5017 Russell Avenue South in the Fulton neighborhood. I've been a 17-year Southwest Minneapolis resident, 14 in the Linden Hills neighborhood, and the past 3 years in Fulton. I love my neighborhood. I love Linden Hills. I love Fulton. I love all of Minneapolis. I think it's a great place to live, and I think it will continue to be. I am concerned about the pace of tear downs. I also have several friends in the construction industry, and they're concerned about this issue as well. This is a very difficult decision for you all to make. I'll try not to repeat things other people have said. I think this is a blunt instrument, but unfortunately, sometimes a blunt instrument is exactly what's called for. I think this has brought a lot of people together to have this kind of discussion. I'm hopeful that the people in this room will avoid animosity and ill will against one another and actually work together to see something done quickly. I'm supportive of the concept of the moratorium as long as it's kept as tightly focused as possible, and this becomes the top priority of this group here because it is putting a lot of people, it is impacting many, many people, and I was pained to hear the stories of a lot of the individual residents harmed by this situation. I hope you can, on a case-by-case basis, quickly resolve issues that individuals are happening so they're not unfairly burdened, and work as quickly as possible to try to correct what does appear to be a pretty serious problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I close the public hearing, is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Madam Chair, Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Scott Busen. I'm a resident of 4615 Wooddale Avenue in Edina. My office is at 50th and France in Edina. We build custom homes in Edina and Minneapolis. We build over 42 infill custom homes in tight neighborhoods similar to Minneapolis. And I've gone through the experience Edina has over the past 5 years. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. The one thing I want to make sure I say is that, the builders, there's been a lot of bad things said about builders, and I agree there's issues. I think the issues that were put up there by Mr. Whittinger are more of a nuisance nature. The zoning issues are a separate bucket of issue, but I feel the problems with construction are mostly related to problems with enforcement with the city. They need to hire people to go out and enforce the issues that are on the books, and also develop an improved construction management plan. And as a builder, I'd love to collaborate with Minneapolis, and I was invited along with 15 other builders to a symposium meeting to collaborate 2 Fridays back. We were invited down to Minneapolis. We were very fortunate to come down and discuss ideas I've had with Edina on how to improve the process. We basically walked in the room, we introduced ourselves, and then we were told there was a moratorium. So the packet of ideas I had really sat in my briefcase, and that was our first introduction with collaborating with Minneapolis. So I want to say that the process was not transparent. There was not notice. I know legally we can do it, but legally should have we done it? From that meeting, I went and called my client who was packing up her home to move out. They had to stop all their plans. So, but the one thing I want to leave you with 2 ideas from my experience with Edina. This is the 4th time we've been through this with Minneapolis and Edina combined. In the previous 3 times, there was not a moratorium used and change was made. So we did not have to put the neighborhoods on hold, shut down the neighborhoods to make change. And I think we can do it again. Mayor Hodges did it very effectively, and I think we can do the same thing here. I think at this point, to Council Member Palmasato's credit, her passion has brought the issues to the table. But I think at this point, a moratorium is sort of water under the bridge. I don't think we need it to address the issues. And the second thing I want to tell you that Edina did last time in 2012 when they went through this is that they broke the issue of construction management and zoning into separate buckets. So they tackled construction management first because, as we can see, we already got concrete issues. We know what's wrong with the construction management process. We can pull together a construction management plan and get that accomplished first.
Thank you.
And then move on to the zoning. I think that way you'll be more effective rather than have to deal with both issues at the same time, as I feel zoning is a much more open-ended issue.
Okay, thank you. It looks like we have a few more people who would like to speak. I just want to remind everyone of the time. Your comments are very important to us, but we need time to discuss this as well. So please try not to use the 2 minutes and at this point and keep your remarks to something that we haven't yet heard. So I'd like to invite anyone else up to speak who would like to.
Good afternoon. Thank you. We were supposed to close on our house a week ago, 5414 Washburn Avenue South. I've been in the neighborhood for 4 years as a small business owner on the corner of 50th and Penn, providing fitness and health and wellness consulting, personal training, small group classes. We have roughly 300 members, clients, 6 staff, 15 family members. The delay or the unexpected moratorium has cost my family a huge burden. Whether that's daily fees with delay in closing, unknown expected values, and the hardship of just qualifying for a loan as a small business owner. It's taken 4 years to kind of get into position to be able to purchase a home. Our plans are under 1,500 square feet, which was the exception B of the moratorium. To make sure that our plans were approved, we went down to the permit office, and an individual said, no, they look like a new house. So again, subjectivity, and it's a complete dangerous, very slippery slope because we have put a lot of money to this, $14,280. We're not able to carry the costs. If a waiver's even granted. I was told 6 to 8 weeks for that. We are part of the neighborhood. We are part of the community. We want to become residents in the neighborhood. We're all in this together, and I guess I had a lot to say, but I just think it's a little bit irresponsible. And we all agree with the goals and intentions of the moratorium, but to kind of put a hard stop on families and small business owners. And we lived at 45th and York for a couple of years, and we witnessed and experienced those firsthand teardowns. It was a mess for a couple of weeks, and we learned to get over it, and we walked on the other side of the road. And we'd love to be as courteous to our neighbors during our project.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Kevin Terrell, a resident of Lyndhurst, 5337 Oliver Avenue South. I'm also on the Lyndhurst Neighborhood Association Board. So first thing I want to say is I've worked with several of you on issues that have to do with property rights and the environment, specifically RNAV and the airport. So I can certainly understand that you guys can work on these types of issues in a collaborative way. This doesn't feel like that. I did my own teardown in Lyndhurst. I general contracted it myself. What did I do? I handed out copies of what the plans look like to all my neighbors. I invited them to the teardown party. I asked them to tell me what color the house should be. I went out of my way to use stucco so that it fits into the neighborhood. I did sort of a prairie-style two-story house like much of Minneapolis. Ironically, the city basically made me make the roof line higher so that actually obstructed my neighbor's view even more. But that's a different story. So we've heard you guys propose a solution, if you will. You think a moratorium is a solution to this problem. I'm going to propose an alternate process. And Lene and I talked about this the other day. One thing you could do, for instance, what most businesses would do, for instance, is slow walk permits. So if you want to move some staff offline, and in Ward 13 it takes 12 weeks to get a permit instead of 6, let's do that. We get some capacity to work on the project while still maintaining progress. Secondly, you could use an outside consultant. This is pretty clearly a problem, I would say, that someone from the outside can come in, diagnose the situation, and come up with solutions. Why do I say that? I'm a consultant. It's what I do. I would suggest you might also get the contractors to pay for that. Tell them it's $40,000. Independent team's going to select that person, and we're going to come up with a solution. In a month, we'll have some answers that you can work with. Finally, I know Lene likes to talk about innovation, and she and I have talked about that on RNAV, how to take a look at better measuring what's going on in the environment in our community. We can do the same thing here. You can walk across the street to Cocoa. There's an app developer that in fact has an app that takes a look at city issues and allows people in the community to report what's going on, give transparency to everyone, walk across the street and make it happen.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who has something to say that hasn't yet been said? Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Jen Borger. I live at 4512 Drew Avenue South. I am a lifetime resident of Linden Hills. I'm about to move into my 4th home in Linden Hills, and I'm proud to say that it is a new build. I'm not going to reiterate the things that have already been said today, but I do want to mention that the message that this sends to the anyone who wants to move into Minneapolis is incredibly negative. To do business in this city and to live in this city is to be told what you can and cannot do. And increasingly, that message is what you cannot do. And I would like that to be a strong consideration as you make your decisions. Again, I'm a lifetime resident here. I want to see Linden Hills and the rest of the city, frankly, continue to grow. The stated goal of 500,000 people in Minneapolis is a great one, and one that we cannot achieve without with measures such as the moratorium. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carrie Amundsen, 3810 West 32nd Street, Minneapolis. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I've lived in my townhome on 32nd Street for 17 years, have wanted to live in a house for a really long time, have been saving up. I love Minneapolis. I would love to stay here. I've spent a year looking for a teardown opportunity around Lake Harriet and was able to find one in January. it was put on the market in January, kind of went back and forth on offers, and actually agreed on a price on March 7th. And so we had to put a contingent offer based on what you do with this decision. That the seller is 87 years old and hasn't been able to sell the property because it's in bad need of repair. It's run down. It's beyond repair. But he would be very happy to be able to close this deal, take this money, and move on and retire. I would be elated to be able to build a house on a 58-foot lot that's stucco, that's consistent with the other houses on the street. I have a phone full of pictures of houses around South Minneapolis that I love, the architecture that my builder is willing to replicate and copy. And I don't want to live in suburbs. I don't want a suburban house, and I understand the issues. I understand the construction issues. I will be hard on my builder. I don't want any of these pictures associated with me, but I believe that there's better ways to deal with this issue than a moratorium and a delay, because if there's a delay, I'm going to go somewhere else, because in my neighborhood, there's been huge apartment buildings built in my backyard, back behind Whole Foods, and it's crazy, and I'm anxious to get out. It's taken me a long time to find a place, and I hope that you can do something quickly for me and the 87-year-old seller. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Michael Seakosh. I live at 3714 Colgate Avenue. And in the interest of not repeating a lot of facts that have been stated here today, I'm going to share some personal accounts. One of them in the neighborhood, and I think generally speaking in our community and in our nation, that a lot of the citizens are they don't have a lot of faith in big government in Washington, and I think they see our local government as big government as well. And I think the moratorium speaks to an underlying issue of mistrust in the system, because it was done without a whole lot of transparency, and it speaks to the city not being able to police itself and move the processes forward for regulations that they have in place. Secondly, I can tell you specifically, I have 2 family friends that are looking to move into the city, and because of this, it speaks to the point that I've just made, that they're no longer making that consideration because they're afraid that something like this could happen again. And there's been a lot of anecdotal statements made around the builders who have prejudiced some of the folks in this room today. And I certainly empathize with you, but I will give you my own anecdote of being a responsible citizen who just went through this process of doing a major renovation. And I try to be very transparent with my neighbors and collaborate with them, not only with tree trimming, but the job site, and having that open line of communication with my builder as well, because I was trying to be a responsible citizen. So I think a lot of people in this room today and throughout the city may demonize this process, but that's not the case. There are good citizens out here who are civically responsible, who certainly have the best interests of their neighbors in mind, and we want to make this a more transparent process for all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'd like to close the public hearing unless anyone has anything burning to say, so that we have time to take action. Okay, if anyone else.
Say one last thing.
Okay.
So I live at 4609 Beard Avenue South. I am not only a resident, my kids go to school at Lake Harriet, I'm a realtor, and I'm an investor. We invest in the community that we live in because we love it. We've done what you say is build like you build next door. Funny that you say that, because I did 2 houses right next to my house. And we went through the process, so I know what it's like. I know what it's like to deal with the neighbors and the neighbors that are upset about it. One thing is, we had plans set out. Low roof line, great, fantastic, beautiful prairie-style home. Went to zoning, city said we need a 612 pitch roof. Some of you might not know what that is, but it's a lot steeper. Everyone was upset. They blamed us as investors, blamed my builder, blamed us as neighbors, talked behind our backs. Awful experience. The lack of education on what zoning actually does to these homes is apparent to me, because they don't understand that we wanted to have a shallower roof line. 612 was required by the city. So in regards to this moratorium, I'd like to ask you as the council members, along with the inspection department, the zoning department, what is your responsibility? During this 12-month moratorium, jobs are getting lost, income is getting denied. You guys are working. you're reshifting your jobs around so you're still getting an income. At what point do you have to take responsibility and say, you know what, the inspection part of it, there needs to be fines. There needs to be people out there looking at every single job site. So with that, I think you should really reflect on what the city's responsibility is in this as well.
Thank you. Didn't hear your name and address for the public record, Council President. Ma'am, do we have your name for the record?
Oh, Kami Augustine, 4609.
Kami Augustine. Thank you. Thank you, Council President. With that, I will close the public hearing. We have received an enormous amount of communication about this, and I want to thank you all so much for taking the time to come here today to speak, to take your time to listen to your neighbors. I know that people are very passionate about this on both sides. We have also received a lot of calls and emails. All of those are part of the public record, and Councilmember Palmisano has been forwarding to us all of the communications that have gone directly to her office. With that, I'll see Councilmember Palmisano. Did you want to speak?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I ask that we take everything that we've heard into consideration here today, both all the correspondence that you've received on this, and I ask us to be very thoughtful about this. From what I've heard in neighborhood meetings, from what I hear here today, and the correspondence we've received, I organize it in 3 different ways. First, there are things that there's things that are bad, and there are things that we're not going to be able to change in this. Second, there are policies that we can make very quick progress on. I can assure you that we've started that already, and that this has brought people to the table. It really has been an all hands on deck moment. That is wonderful, and those are some of the people that are here today. So thank you for that. Thank you deeply. The third component, I think, are ordinance changes. I like that we're being given a chance to address this. I really like Mr. Wittenberg's presentation of the study at hand. This is about growth. This is our ability to live and work and play and raise a family in these neighborhoods. So I ask that we work on living as a community. I ask this as being part of a community, whether you're a builder that is here temporarily or whether you live here for decades and decades or hopefully a generation. I do think we need to build like we live next door. I think we need to sell the real estate like we live next door. I thank you for those that live next door. And I just wanted to thank everybody for their thoughts today.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'm going to move to continue this item 1 cycle with the goal of having an answer with regard to whether or not we can move forward, whether or not we need a moratorium in place to do the things that we need to do or not. The purpose of a public hearing is to gather information. And those of us in this job, part of what we need to do is some negotiation. And part of that is to figure out what are the things that we can't do anything about. And there are many of them. For example, we can't be telling real estate agents, don't market your home for tear down, market it for something else, as much as I would love to tell you to do that, and believe me, I would. The second piece of it has to do with policy changes we can make right away. Apparently, the code says you have to have a porta potty. There's a house being built right next door to my house, which was a tear down. There's no porta potty out there. You'd think if they live next to the council member, you'd think they'd know that they had to have a porta potty out there, but they don't, and I'm glad they don't actually, so maybe we should be regulating that. And then there are the pieces that require ordinance changes that might take a lot more time, but they might not need a moratorium in order to be worked on by staff. The last piece of it, and it's probably not something for our committee, is we should be using some of the permit fees to hire some people like they've done in other communities to do better enforcement. This is the piece for me that I find to be government's sole responsibility, and no moratorium in place is going to tell us to do our jobs. We should know to do that, and we should figure out how we can do that fast, and that perhaps means moving that through the Ways and Means Committee instead of this committee. I hate for us as a policy committee to say, let's go ahead and do this, and then have Ways and Means say, well, we didn't even hear anything about it. So ultimately, there are things we can't do anything about, and I apologize for that. There are things we can do something about. There are 2 tracks for those, and I think the 2-week period of time would get us into a place where our staff can determine which of these categories do each of these things fit under, and how can we move forward, and do we really need a moratorium in place in order to do them. It is not my intent to then have another 2-week period and another 2-week period, so that let this be a notice to staff that that's about the amount of time we think we have. And from my point of view in my ward, if you have to work on this instead of something else, that's okay, because all of the wards in the city are affected by this, and I'm glad that Councilmember Palansamo brought this up. I think it's something that needs to be addressed, and it seems like everybody's attention, all of the council members, as well as the mayor's office, city staff, and people in the community are aware that this is something that has to be done. So that is my explanation for my motion. I do want to keep the public hearing open so that if in 2 weeks we have a framework of something that we can discuss, people can actually comment on it, versus the alternative, which would be moving, doing nothing or postponing it a cycle. If I just postponed it a cycle, the public wouldn't have an opportunity to speak, and we might have something for people to react to within 2 weeks.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman. So to reiterate, we have a motion on the floor to postpone this item for 2 weeks, to continue, thank you, this is why I'm doing this, to continue the item for 2 weeks, to be back at zoning and planning in 2 weeks with another public hearing.